everybody. A very good morning. It is 7 o'clock on today's programme. We're talking about Storm Isha that's causing chaos. We'll tell you about the damage, Gareth.
We certainly will. Plus, amid measles warnings to a new appeal to parents to vaccinate their kids, we'll ask our resident doctor.
We will. Childcare.
Yeah, we'll be discussing the government's promise on free childcare with reports of pressures over its delivery, and we'll be joined by the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, as well.
Yep, looking forward to all of that. It's Monday, the 22nd of January. Tens of thousands of homes without power and a tornado alert as 99-mile-an-hour winds batter parts of the UK and Ireland. Travel disruption with trains, ferries and flights cancelled.
The plane started going up, down, sideways. I actually thought we were going to meet our makers.
The latest weather and travel news from across the UK from our team right around the UK in Carlisle, Dublin, New Haven and also King's Cross. Could postal services be reduced to alternate days as union bosses warn it could threaten tens of thousands of jobs? Was this a hint at what's to come from Donald Trump as Ron DeSantis bows out of the White House race to throw his support behind his Republican rival?
I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
A whistleblower who resigned from Greater Manchester Police tells Sky News that the force's failures have left children at risk.
I don't think we're making things better for these kids. In fact, I think we're making it worse. I don't think this child protection unit is fit for purpose.
Religious fault line. Indian Prime Minister Modi to open a contentious Hindu temple built on the ruins of an ancient mosque. Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us here on The Breakfast Show, Monday morning, Sky News. Our top story for you is the chaos caused by Storm Isha likely to continue. 99-mile-an-hour winds, tornado alerts, tens of thousands without power and widespread travel disruption. Alice has more.
Unstoppable and unrelenting. Storm Isha made its mark here on the west coast of Scotland, but its power is being felt right across the UK. And with the destruction,
just to be aware of, all passenger services will be suspended.
Came severe disruption on land, sea and air. With gusts reaching over 90 miles per hour, there were cancellations, delays and diverted flights.
I suspect we won't end up flying back to Bristol because the risk is just too much, really.
These passengers, bound for Gatwick, diverted instead to Paris, having to board late-night coaches back to London.
The plane started going up, down, sideways. I actually thought we were going to meet our makers. So everyone kind of remained calm until the pilot suddenly pulled up the thruster and we realised that we weren't going to land.
Trees falling on train tracks, spelling chaos for commuters. Like this one near Glasgow, which sparked a small fire. There's also been less typical obstacles. This is the 9th storm of the season, but it's unique for covering all corners of the country. And just beyond the UK, Ireland is feeling the weight of this storm. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power. The worst of Storm Isha may be over, but its effects will be felt for some time to come. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Just before you head out this morning, then, let's catch up with the team and see where the issues are. Shingi is in Carlisle, Stephen is in Dublin, Ashna is in New Haven on the south coast, and Alice is at King's Cross. Shingi, what's the danger of flooding where you are? Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, lots has been made of those high winds, but also this weather has brought with it heavy rainfall, and we're by the River Eden, which at points has a number of flood warnings along it. That is because of the rain that has come in overnight, and we understand that on low-lying ground there's particular risk, with environmental agencies saying that they have deployed pumps people and equipment to try and help people. And as I say, there are 30 weather warnings in place across the country, a number of them here in Cumbria where I am, which is unsurprising given that this is the county which is vast, rural and is home to the Lake District. But this kind of flooding on top of those high winds compounds what is a really difficult effort to help people get back on the grid. Electricity Northwest is saying hundreds of people are without power. The flooding makes it harder to reach those people in those communities on the back of what's already been a difficult month when it comes to flooding, with another named storm just weeks before this.
Yeah, and just across the border where you are in Northumberland, winds of up to 99 miles an hour. Goodness me. Meantime, Stephen, massive power outages in Ireland and Northern Ireland overnight.
Yeah, that's right. The latest figures that we have here in the Republic of Ireland are for 170,000 ESB networks. That's the main utility here. The 170,000 homes and businesses without power this morning. So a major clean-up operation taking place right across Ireland. The Storm Isha tracked right across the island. And then north of the border, currently this morning we're being told that around 48,500 people there are without power as well. More than 1,000 road blockages reported in Northern Ireland, which hinders those crews as they go around trying to find the power outages and replace them so that people can go about their business. Blustery, windy conditions as well will hinder that work as it continues throughout the day. But yeah, well over 200,000 people currently without any power this morning.
Yeah, Ashna, it's rare for the whole country to be impacted in this way. I believe we're also on tornado alert.
Yeah, that's right, Kay. I mean, winds of up to 99 miles per hour seem to have passed now. That's what we've been told. But I have to say, it doesn't really feel like it. If there's any a day to work from home, this feels like the morning to do so. Winds of up to 54 miles per hour here on the south coast, really whipping up across the channel. Waves reaching up to 4 foot high. But those winds and the force of it really impacting loads of people, hundreds of homes without power here in the southeast. Even driving down, you can really feel the wind pummeling against the car and even driving down, rubbish strewn everywhere, dustbins being sort of turned over by the impact of this wind. And we know that the waves have impacted ferry crossings here. Newhaven to Dieppe is quite a common ferry route. Those had to be cancelled last night. But also flights from Gatwick Airport having to be diverted to places like Lyon and Paris. So Sussex today really picking up the pieces.
Indeed. Alice, looking at the train schedules last night, Scotland trains cancelled after 7 o'clock, London, Euston, Avanti, West Coast saying on Twitter that their services were ending at 4:15. No rush hour trains this morning in Scotland. It's pretty bad, as we're hearing there from Ashna, probably, potentially, a day to work from home.
Yeah, that's right. It's having an enormous impact across the country because ScotRail have suspended all their train services, and that's having a knock-on impact across our entire rail network. And if you do manage to get a train, you're going to see speed restrictions in place because of the concern of falling debris from fallen trees on the train tracks. But it's not just on the train tracks that we're seeing this disruption. We're also seeing it on some of the major roads across the UK, particularly up in Cumbria. There were a number of overturned lorries, and that's causing a lot of chaos. But really the extraordinary footage we've seen over the last few hours when it's come to the travel chaos has been on flights. There's been footage of flights that have been unable to land at some of the major airports across the UK, including here in London, at London City, but also Manchester and Edinburgh as well. It's simply not been safe for those flights to land, and so some of them have been diverted to the other airports in the UK or even further afield.
OK, team, for now, try and keep dry and warm wherever you are. Go and have a cup of tea. We'll chat to you again soon. Thanks very much indeed, all of you. Thank you. Oh, I hate seeing it when Big Jet TV show those images of those planes trying to land. Oh, goodness me.
If you're slightly squeamish about flying, it's not good fodder for you, is it? But I always think it's remarkable that they do manage to land them. I think it should be seen as a successful landing rather than a struggle to land.
Have you ever been on those?
I was once on a flight that was flying along and then it lost lift for a bit and you were held in by your seatbelt, and that was a bit gut-wrenching.
Oh, OK.
Yeah, that wasn't very fun.
There was a storm when we were coming into Heathrow and we were just about to touch down and he went again, and it's like, oh...
You didn't end up in Germany like that
flight.
No, we didn't. That's all right.
He went round again, British Airways, thank you very much, and it was fine.
Very good.
Royal Mail as well, posties. I wonder what they're doing in this sort of weather this morning. We're going to be talking to the head of the union that represents the posties, the CWU, about some suggestions. We were looking at that report this morning, weren't we? And we discovered that potentially, it was an exclusive by Mark Kleiman, potentially postal deliveries only every other day.
Yes.
Will it impact on you? Do you care?
For me, less so. But I'm thinking back to my time living in rural North Yorkshire, for example, when it's not just letters that are being delivered by posties. They're also a key central part of local communities. They're often taking posts from elderly people who maybe can't get around as well and get to the local post office or the post box. They're checking in on people. They play a much wider role than just delivering and picking up post. And it strikes me that if that's slowly broken down, it has more of an impact than just whether you're going to get your letter. And also those letters are from the NHS and from the government and from your bank and stuff.
Yeah, but a lot of it is done by email. I was just looking at the figures.
Right.
Our service is designed for 20 billion letters a year, and presently it's 7 billion. Potentially it could go down to 4 billion a year. How many emails do you think you know? Because I told you.
No, I don't. I heard, but I didn't hear the answer to this.
OK. How many emails do you think are sent per day? Given it's 7 billion letters per year in the UK, how many emails per day?
I'm trying to think of my inbox at the moment, and also my other half's inbox, which is never 7 billion letters, 3 billion emails a day.
OK, I'm going to tell you after you've done the bully.
Oh, tease, absolute tease. Well, let's quickly bring you the top stories this morning to get the answer from Kay. Let's start with the United States. The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, has endorsed his Republican Party rival Donald Trump for president in this year's US election. That's after pulling out of the race himself. It ends a bitter feud that had largely defined the 2024 campaign.
Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear.
I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
Our correspondent in the US is James Matthews. He has more.
There was a time when Ron DeSantis was the hottest ticket in the Republican movement, the biggest danger to Donald Trump. But like others before him and around him, he simply couldn't live with the party's big beast. The wider American audience didn't buy his strategy that was built around culture wars. They weren't too keen on DeSantis himself, the anti-woke warrior. He says he's quit because he couldn't see a clear path to success. I think it's fair to say he couldn't see the funds sustaining a long-term challenge. Donors threw tens of millions of dollars at last week's Iowa caucus, the first verdict of the voters. And it's fair to say that the numbers for DeSantis didn't represent a good investment. The question in the immediate term is what happens to the DeSantis vote? How does that decant into the contest that he's left behind? It's probably fair to say it cuts two ways. Donald Trump occupies similar territory to DeSantis on the right of the Republican movement. He will pick up votes. Nikki Haley is left as the sole contender chasing voters who want to see a Trump alternative. She needs the votes the most. A poll yesterday for CNN showed her 11 percentage points behind Donald Trump. She needs to do well in New Hampshire. Otherwise, she'll be left confronting the same kinds of choices confronted by DeSantis before he pulled out.
Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester airports are set to miss the June the 1st government deadline to install new security scanners. The new machines will end the 100 ml limit on liquids and hand luggage. Representatives at the airports say that they need more time. Dozens of people are missing in China after a landslide hit the mountainous Yunnan province early on Monday. Another 200 people were evacuated and 18 houses destroyed. Rescue efforts are still underway. Millions of parents in England are being urged to book their children in for any measles, mumps and rubella jabs that they might have missed. It's part of a major new NHS drive to protect children from soaring infection rates across the country.
Now to a special report involving a police whistleblower. Hi, good morning. It's nice to see you, Jason. We were talking about Rochdale sex abuse, weren't we, last week? The story continues.
That's right. Well, last week, the Greater Manchester Police were criticised for their failings, multiple failings in the Rochdale grooming investigation. And there was a press conference in which the Chief Constable said lessons had been learned. And then there was this bombshell moment where Maggie Oliver, the detective who'd blown the whistle on Rochdale, stood up and said, no, they haven't. Lessons haven't been learned. You're making the same mistakes. I've spoken to a whistleblower who's just like me 12 years ago, saying you're making the same failures. And this report is the first time that whistleblower has spoken out.
I don't think we're making things better for these kids. In fact, I think we're making it worse. I don't think this child protection unit is fit for purpose. Many of the children have reported multiple disclosures of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect and psychological torture. And this is what professionals have called some of the worst abuse they've ever seen. I wanted to go and see them regularly, but the time just wasn't made available to me. And so you'd go and speak to them, you'd bring it all back up, re-traumatise them, and then you'd leave them hanging.
And what were your superiors saying back to you?
You just got a lot of shoulder shrugging, you know, sort of, it's out of my hands sort of thing. I had a Teams meeting with the DCI. Oh, you know, he's making all these promises to me. I'll get you the resources. It just didn't happen. I know that the superintendent level knew about this, so it goes that far up. You start to realise it doesn't matter how far you go up, no one's going to listen.
So, Lucy, they're leading this massive investigation, feeling totally unsupported. GMP say that a significant number of officers in child protection are now working in that field. There have been large increases. They say her concerns are being looked at a senior level. They add, we can confirm that the children in question had been subject to safeguarding arrangements for several years before reports of non-recent abuse were made, and they were protected and are safe and well, and have been throughout the course of the investigation. A team of 4 officers continue to investigate. 2 suspects remain under investigation, and reviews have been taking place every 6 weeks since January 2023. Lucy says there are more than 2 people. There are more children that could still be at risk. She feels this is a paedophile ring. She says it's been at large for at least 7 years and describes that as a failing. And I think the other thing is, here is an officer who wanted to investigate this. She's now left the force, and she's left the force because she feels she was letting those children down.
OK, we'll see your reports throughout the day, I should say, here on Sky News, of course, and online. Thanks very much indeed. And we'll be speaking to the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnam, later on in the programme here on Sky News. Joining us around about 7:30. Looking at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There'll be a very brief respite between Storm Isha leaving and the next low-pressure system arriving tomorrow, bringing a second dose of strong winds and heavy rain. The amber wind warnings have just expired, but it will be a windy start to the day. Blustery showers will blow in from the west, with some being heavy and also thundery. Those over the higher ground of Scotland are likely to turn wintry.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Joined by the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Let's talk about the weather quickly, should we? Any concerns from the government overnight with what's going on?
Well, obviously, it's very concerning for residents across the country. You know, if they have any concerns, they should ring 105. But
what does that do? 105?
So that's if
Never heard that before.
Yeah, that's if you're concerned about your network. Obviously, network operators are looking at these issues across the country. OK. I'm reading this morning, front page of the Times, that thousands of parents have been warned that they'll be unable to access the government's offer of free childcare this year because of problems with its introduction. What's going on there? Well, you're right. We have brought in a massive childcare policy to ensure that more parents have access to childcare, a flagship policy which is going to help people across the country. I note that there have been some concerns, and I understand that those will be resolved. I think there's a
in time.
I believe so.
It's only
yes.
3 months to go, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. I think there was some issue in relation to people who are already claiming tax-free benefits in relation to the childcare, but a temporary fix is being established, and so parents won't need to do anything at all.
So just to clarify, there's a bit of a problem, but you will have sorted it out and keep your promise by April.
Yeah, my understanding is that it will be fixed.
OK. I also understand that you have been able to look at Jason's piece on Rochdale and the fact that it would appear that an officer has stepped down because she feels that a paedophile ring still operates in Rochdale. What should be done about it?
This is really, really terrible news, very important issue. We must, of course, look after our children. I understand that these issues were raised last week and there is an investigation in relation to this. Obviously, the police are operationally independent from government, so I understand that this is being investigated.
I mean, it's terrible that something like this happened many years ago. We heard from Andy Burnam, Greater Manchester Mayor, along with the head of Greater Manchester Police last week. They said, it's all sorted. We've got a whistleblower talking to our Jason Farrell who says that it isn't.
This is absolutely terrible. And as I said, there's an investigation ongoing. And I'm sure the responsible department will be looking and following this carefully. The police, as I said, are operationally independent. But these sorts of things should absolutely not be happening.
OK. Talk to me about the Royal Mail. I'm reading that Ofcom, who you work closely with, may suggest that the Royal Mail makes deliveries every other day and not at all on Saturdays. How does the government feel about that?
Well, that's an issue that obviously the Royal Mail will have to be discussing with the relevant department.
It will, but Ofcom is suggesting that that is a possibility. We were hearing a little bit earlier on, in fact, my colleague was saying it's more than just delivering letters. It's about checking on old people, making sure that they're OK, perhaps conversations that they wouldn't have otherwise. Are we content that the Royal Mail goes down to deliveries of every other day, like they do in Europe, actually? Quite a few countries in Europe do that.
No, I think the Royal Mail provides an excellent service in terms of, one that we all rely on across the country, and we know that, those letters and parcels are absolutely critical. But the issue of, how long they're going to deliver, when they're going to deliver, that's not an issue for me and my department.
OK, so you wouldn't be concerned if it was reduced to every other day?
Well, I think people across the country will be concerned about that. But I'm sure there are many factors that have got to be taken into account, and that's not something I personally have been looking at.
No, but you have a view, don't you? I mean, you're a member of the public as well, and you get your post every day at the moment. The suggestion is it'll be every other day. Would that cause you any problems, challenges, or are you more of an email person?
Well, I think we all get our news and our deliveries and communications from others in a whole range of ways. I know that this will be troubling for some people, but as I said, this isn't something that I'm looking at in my department. OK,
what you are looking at is the BBC and whether or not they are as impartial as they might be online. Which other outlets are you also looking into?
Well, what you're talking about is a midterm review that we've published today. And what that is about is the fact that although the BBC is the most fantastic public institution, it's really important that the public maintains its trust in it. And what we've heard from audiences is that some people think it's biased. Some people think that their complaints aren't heard. Well, what I've looked at is the evidence. And the evidence from Ofcom is that 39% of complaints last year were in relation to impartiality, whereas the previous year they were 19%. So there is a perception amongst audiences that
but
the BBC
perception isn't necessarily reality.
Well, there are only perceptions, and perceptions are important. What's important about the BBC is that it's funded by the public. So the perceptions of audiences, of the public, are important. And although it's a trust in the BBC in terms of accuracy are good, in terms of impartiality, audience faith in the BBC has gone down. And so that's why we have published today, having worked with the BBC, a number of measures to enhance impartiality and also in relation to strengthening independent scrutiny of complaints, which is really important because if audiences want to complain about the BBC, they should feel like they're being heard.
Do you think the BBC is biased?
Well, I am looking at this from the point of view of the Culture Secretary.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking you.
And
so do you think they're biased?
And the evidence shows that there is a perception of bias in relation to the BBC.
What do you think? Do you think, as Culture Secretary, that the BBC is biased?
I think that on occasion it has been biased, yes.
In relation to what?
Well, this report isn't about incidents, but we have seen recently that it's had to apologise for its own reporting, for example, in relation to the attack in the hospital in Israel, so in Gaza.
What's the difference between mistake and bias, surely?
Well, there is a perception amongst the public that the BBC is biased, and as Culture Secretary, it's important that I look at that. I must say, these are issues that I have discussed with the BBC. They've taken on board.
Yeah, but I'm asking you about the evidence of bias. Where's the evidence?
The evidence of bias is what audiences believe is the content of the BBC and how they...
perception, that's not evidence. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evidence. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC, and the evidence in relation to that perception is that...
perception and evidence are different things.
The evidence from Ofcom, having done studies and questionnaires of the public, is that the BBC's ratings in relation to impartiality have gone down. And I and the BBC think that there is more that the BBC can do in order to improve that.
Which other broadcasters are you investigating? Which other broadcasters do you feel potentially are not impartial?
The reason we've done this review is because the BBC is in a special position.
Yeah, but I'm asking you which other broadcasters you think are not impartial.
My job as the Culture Secretary is to... It has a special role in relation to the BBC, and the reason for that is because the BBC is funded by the public.
I understand that, but I'm asking you whether you think other broadcasters might not be impartial.
Well, other broadcasters, I must say with respect, are in a totally different position to the BBC because they're not funded by the public.
Still need to be impartial.
Because they're not governed...
According to the Ofcom code.
Yes, but the BBC is in a particular position for two reasons. One, it is funded by the public, and second, it is governed by a charter. And the reason we've done this review is because it was set out a number of years ago that between charter reviews, there's an 11-year period between charter reviews, there should be a mid-term review. That's what this is. I haven't suddenly decided one day to do a review of the impartiality.
No, I understand that, but I'm asking you about other broadcasters and whether they're also impartial.
So all broadcasters, as you say, who choose to be governed by Ofcom,
which
have rules in relation to impartiality, and Ofcom regulates those and looks very closely at those rules in relation to impartiality. But it's very different to the BBC.
OK, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's good to see you as always.
Thanks very
so
much.
much indeed for joining us. Thank you. So what's going to happen as far as the BBC is concerned? We've been hearing there from the Culture Secretary. She's telling us that it's a mid-term review as far as the BBC is concerned, and there is a perception that the BBC is not impartial. The big question is whether, just because there's a perception, it's actually a reality. What do you think, Rob?
Morning, Kay. I thought that was a difficult exchange for the Culture Secretary there, because this whole release and push around the mid-term charter review today is very much angled around the BBC needs to do better on impartiality and better handling complaints. But when pushed repeatedly, as you just did, to give some cast-iron evidence of bias and lack of impartiality in the BBC, I thought the Culture Secretary struggled, actually. I was talking to one former senior BBC employee last night who said, actually, some of the big issues that the Culture Secretary, that Ofcom could be focusing on right now is not so much this sort of hobby horse around the BBC, but it's other channels merging politics and reporting and news, and
Didn't
also
want to go there, though, did she?
and also foreign ownership of newspapers, which is something we may well be talking about this week as well.
OK, Burnam, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Greater Manchester Police criticised by a former officer over investigations into child abuse. We'll be speaking to Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnam. We'll also speak to the boss of the Communication Workers Union on the prospect of Saturday Post being scrapped by the Royal Mail. And we'll get a live update on Storm Isha, which has disrupted power and transport networks right across the UK and Scotland.
And now it's coming from both sides. moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with the rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. I don't think the Minister enjoyed her chat with me much this morning.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Talk to me about the weather, though.
Well, just a quick window weather watch out the window here. It's certainly calmed down this morning. It's dark, I can tell you that much. It's calmed down, has it? The weather warnings, that the amber ones expired at 6, the yellow warning continuing. There's more yellow warnings for wind into Tuesday, Wednesday as well. And we've seen, just looking at the figures here, was it 45,000 in Northern Ireland, 8,000 in the northwest of England, and 3,000 people in Wales with no power. Yeah. And then also flood warnings as well. There's about 80 flood warnings.
Gusting of 99 miles an hour. That's impressive. Up in Northumberland, near Alnwick Castle, just on the coast. A beautiful coastline up there, but my goodness, it gets the weather.
Yeah, massively so. And not just there, is it? It's kind of bouncing around Capel Cruig in Wales, 90 miles an hour, the Needles, 86 as well. So a particularly stormy night. We'll have plenty more of that when we're coming up throughout the course of this morning. Now, a whistleblower has told Sky News Greater Manchester Police Child Protection Investigation Unit isn't fit for purpose. We'll put that to Andy Burnam, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, shortly, and we'll also be looking at postal services coming up. But let's bring you the headlines this morning. We're looking at those pictures of Storm Isha that's unleashed heavy rain and potentially deadly winds through the night across the UK and Ireland. Millions are being told that travel will be badly disrupted throh the day and into this week. Ofcom will be outlining options for reforming Royal Mail service obligations this week, with possible modifications to first and second class delivery targets. Some modifications might include moving to alternate day deliveries and abolishing Saturday deliveries. And the Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, has endorsed his Republican Party rival Donald Trump for president in this year's US election after pulling out of the race. It ends a bitter feud that had largely defined the 2024 campaign so far. As we've been saying, a As we've been saying, a whistleblower who resigned from Greater Manchester Police has told Sky News that the force's child protection unit, where she worked, is not fit for purpose. And she believes that failures have left a paedophile ring at large for at least 7 years.
Well, our team's monitoring things right across the UK and Ireland for you. Ashna is in New Haven. Alice is at King's Cross for us. Alice, to you, first of all, terrible problems with the trains, both last night and rush hour this morning.
Yeah, that's right. I've just gone and had a look at the departures board, and whilst the trains, generally speaking, are running to time here in London, unfortunately, the trains that are coming in, the trains that are arriving, there are a number of delays, and that's because they're arriving particularly from Scotland. And we know that ScotRail, they have suspended all services, and we had an update from them in the last hour, and they've continued that suspension, and that's having a knock-on impact across different services. And staff have been working through the night to try and ascertain just how bad it is in terms of the falling debris, the fallen trees that have made their way onto the train lines. There are a number of speed restrictions in place, though, so even if your train is running to time, it's most likely going to take you a lot longer to get to where you need to go.
Ashna's on the coast. What's it like where you are, Ashna? Morning.
Well, certainly, good morning, Kay. On the coast, you can definitely feel the effects of Storm Isha whipping away. Even though the worst of it has passed, look, some of it is still whipping across the sea wall behind me. We can take a look at some of those waves. Every so often, they whip across that promenade, and a lot of people have been coming down to try and get a look at it. That, of course, is the advice, to not do that at all. It's having a severe impact here in the southeast, not only on people's homes, but also on the flights here. We're in Gatwick, which is just down the road from where I am. Flights are unable, or have been unable, to land here in the UK. They're actually having to go and land in places like Lyon and Paris, really showing you how there is just such treacherous conditions overnight. They have not been able to land in the normal way, but really the impact is going to be felt for a long time to come, I think.
OK, for now, thank you. We'd like your thoughts on this as well, and your stories and your photographs, if you've got some that you can share, even moving images. Scan the QR code. You can see on the screen right now. There you go. Or you can contact us directly on social media at Kay Burley and at Gareth Barlow. Now, claims by the former officer that the Greater Manchester Police are soft on child abuse contradict Mayor Andy Burnham's position that there have been changes, so we thought we'd ask him. Hello to you, Mr Burnham. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. You've heard what has been said by the whistleblower in Jason Farrell's report. It's still a problem in Greater Manchester. Maggie Oliver last week saying, still not listening. Are you listening now?
Oh, certainly listening, Kay. Been listening ever since I took office, because I established this wide-ranging review into the handling of child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester just days after coming into office, for precisely this reason, to bring out all of these issues. As challenging as that is for people, I am absolutely determined that this review completes its work. It's not, I don't think, a contradiction. There have been changes within Greater Manchester Police. I have put the funding together to establish a force-wide child sexual exploitation unit. However, the question is it yet good enough? And clearly, when you hear allegations like this, you know that there's further to go.
So you acknowledge that it's not good enough?
Well, we're actually waiting for a final stage of the review that I set up, which is to look into current practice now. You know, how is the force handling things today? The reviews we've had so far have looked back at situations in the past where there was an allegation that this whole issue wasn't given the right priority. So, you know, I said, well, you can't hear that allegation and not act on it, and that's why I set up the review. But I've also got a further stage that looks at things now. And obviously the allegation that's been put out there today is being looked at right now, but is going to be looked at as part of that review. I need to say it doesn't relate to Rochdale and the issues that were in the news last week. I think it's important for me to make that clear to your view. It's a different issue. And there's a second point that I think also needs to be brought over, and that is that the children involved have been protected throughout. So it is a different situation. Nevertheless, I'm not in any way minimising the seriousness of it.
What does it say, though, when a senior police officer feels that she has no choice but to resign because she doesn't feel that the children in Greater Manchester, some children in Greater Manchester, are being properly looked after by Greater Manchester Police?
Well, clearly it's worrying and it needs to be looked at with urgency and in detail. And that is actually what is happening now. The question that has been kind of put out there by this former officer is whether or not sufficient resourcing is being given to this issue. And it's why, when I saw the results of this review coming through a few years ago, we put together the funding to establish a unit that comprises of more than 100 officers who are looking at these issues from a force level at the centre. And we've also got multi-agency teams in every borough. The question is it enough? Yep. Is there still a high enough priority on these issues? Well, those questions need to be answered, don't they? And that's why I have the final stage of the review. The thing is, Kay, no one asked me to order this review. It was my decision to do it. And as I say, it's some people no doubt will have found it challenging, but I am utterly determined that it completes its work. And it's only by facing up to things as they are, in all of the difficult detail that brings out, that you get the culture change on the issue that I want to bring about. And nothing will stop me from doing that for as long as I'm Mayor of Greater Manchester.
Is there more money available, Mr Mayor, if necessary? If Greater Manchester Police say we need more money to carry on with our work protecting children in the borough, will you make more money available?
Of course. We have already made funding available, but more will be made available. And the whole point, from my point of view, is here, the allegation, the original allegation, Kay, when the Three Girls drama was broadcast, and then we had the Betrayed Girls documentary. That's when I set up this review on the back of what was in those programmes. The allegation was GMP does not give this issue a high enough priority. It doesn't resource it properly. And that allegation is what I have been setting about to correct and making sure it is given the highest possible priority. What higher priority do you need, really, than the protection of our children from paedophiles? I mean, this has got to be at the highest priority. But in fairness, GMP is a different organisation today. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary recently found that GMP is the fastest improving force in the country. Changes clearly are happening inside, but we cannot stop until this question of protecting children is at the highest level of the force's priorities right across our 10 districts.
OK, good to talk to you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for taking the time. Thank you. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has formally opened a controversial Hindu temple which was built on the ruins of a historical mosque. Let's get more, should we? Joining us now, Neville, standing by. Hi, Neville. Why is it controversial?
Morning, Kay. Yes, it is controversial because the very place where this temple is being made, Hindus believe it's the birthplace of Ram, but for the last almost 500 years, there's been a mosque out there. In 1992, right-wing organizations brought a lot of their volunteers out here. They descended into this town and they dropped this mosque. They destroyed it. After that, it's been in a number of court cases locked up, but in 2019, the Supreme Court of India awarded the Hindus this ownership of the land where the mosque was and rejected the claims of the Muslims. Now, it's obviously a big, long sort of promised by right-wing organizations, Prime Minister Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party, to rebuild this, and they have reclaimed it now, and he's made a really big deal of it. It's been hyped up. It will certainly help him garner support and votes in the upcoming general elections, which is due very soon.
OK, love the music behind you there, Neville. It's great. Thanks very much for joining us. Join in if you know the words. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you this morning, taking you around the country to see the sort of challenges that are being faced by those travelling to work, and also Ofcom's ideas about the Royal Mail's future have been leaked. I'm going to be speaking to the boss of the Communication Workers Union.
The reason I'm doing for those selfless veteran who goes through, ex-serviceman goes through all PTSD, anxiety, depression, and then to support them, in whichever level I could do it. And then since I'm involved in a little bit of charity, so I felt like, why not I do some walking challenge myself, so which I've started 3,000 miles.
Mile is for one of those veterans.
Thank you. That's where 3,000 miles came up.
From PTSD. And you're going to be walking around the whole of London, all the London boroughs.
All the London boroughs.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Great. We started just 2 days ago. This is my 3rd day. I'm going to cover every borough. And there are other various places as well, like a Lord's Cricket ground. They have already came to us. There are a team of people, 4 or 5, I mean, from even the combat straight, and then from my side as well. So they are managing the diary. So my job is just they will tell me where to go, and then I'll just go and walk, to be honest.
Can people walk with you?
Yes, they are.
So how do they find out where you're going to be on any given day?
Great. We have a website called Sujan Katwal 3,000 Miles Challenge. So they can find us and they can follow me. And then through that, wherever I'm going, we always put it update in our social media, like tomorrow where I will be. That way they can find us.
And what about if people want to donate money to help?
Same as it's in that page, 3,000 Miles.
You have a GoFundMe page.
GoFundMe page. It's controlled by Combat Stress Charity.
Yes.
And they will update everything. My job is to be on just to walk.
Everybody, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, Wilfred Frost will brief us on all things Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And we'll go through the day's front pages with our political correspondent, Rob Powell. But first, Ofcom could pave the way in scrapping Royal Mail's Saturday Post. It's part of a series of ideas that the regulator may use to set out its consultation paper due this week. It's also believed other reforms could include alternate day deliveries and higher stamp prices. Let's get more, should we, with the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, that's Dave Ward. Hi, Mr. Ward, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. So some of the suggestions being made by Ofcom, what does the union think about it?
Well, we're not blind to the need for change. I don't think any postal worker would be blind for the need for change. But to be perfectly honest with you, we think the whole of Ofcom's approach is a complete sham. It's about getting to a predetermined outcome, and we're not going to sit back and allow Ofcom, Royal Mail, the government, to destroy what is an important public service, which customers still support, and which you can actually expand upon with new products and services. So we're very concerned. Let me explain why as well. This is the same body, Ofcom, who recently produced a report on quality of service that said that Royal Mail was not prioritising parcels over letters, when every customer, every postal worker knows that that wasn't true. So we've got no faith in Ofcom here. This is about them doing what they've been doing for years, which is basically breaking down the universal service. So, yeah, I mean, we're not happy with Ofcom. They produce this report, Kate, without giving any insight to a postal worker's role, their job, what their views are. They never consulted anybody. So, yeah, we're not happy with what Ofcom would do.
You say, Mr. Ward, that you're not going to stand by. What are you going to do?
Well, for us, it's about making sure that the company, that the union, that postal workers and customers have a real debate about what is the future of UK postal services. So we believe that anybody who looks at Royal Mail, looks at its infrastructure, looks at its fleet, looks at how you could expand the role of postal workers, we can actually build a successful company. Now, the infrastructure and the USO is a key part of that, so we're not up for. We're
£319 million lost in the first half of this financial year. They're going to have to recoup that somehow.
Yeah, well, you know, didn't really want to go over old ground, but let's be clear again. The reason that Royal Mail's got such financial difficulties is because of the previous regime tried to destroy basically daily deliveries. And what they did was give all the money away to shareholders. So we're not saying there isn't problems, Kay. You know, I want to be clear on that. What we want to do in the first instance is sit down and build an ambitious growth strategy for the company. Now, within that, there might be some need for change. But let me be clear, what Ofcom are really about here is bringing in 3-day-a-week deliveries, not
what's wrong?
Leading on.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. We've only got a limited amount of time. What's wrong with deliveries every other day? They do it in Germany and they do it in Italy and other countries to, they would say, I suppose, great effect.
Well, they're not doing it in Germany. They're consulting in Germany on the future of the German post office. The German post office gets a lot of support from the government. We don't get any support from the government over here, even though in legislation, the USO is an important public service. So I think what's wrong with it is the same as what's wrong with a lot of businesses. They only ever look at managing decline. They never look at growing a business. We've got some good ideas that we want to bring to the table on growing the business. Within that, there may well be room for change. But it's got to be.
How would you grow the business?
How would we grow the business? Yeah. Well, for a start, we'd focus on creating a vision that is based on a 24/7 network that can deliver next day parcels in the same way that competitors can. We're up for that debate. We'd also make sure that we can look at expanding the role of postal workers. We've been talking about this. By the way, the company recently agreed this in the deal that ended the dispute. So how can that be done? That can be done by recognising the role that postal workers play in local communities. It can be done in ways where you might be able to use a postal worker to access the NHS, to access other public services, to access and support government services. So there's lots of ideas that we're working on. Yeah. We want the company to join with the CW in expanding the business in the future. We've got no faith in Ofcom doing this consultation and then it's going to destroy
like great ideas, Dave. Let's chat about them in more detail next time we see you. Please come in and see us when you can. Thanks very much. Time now to talk to Wilfred Frost to see what's caught his eye today. Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the Republican race, Wilf, and from being Ron DeSanctimonious, he's now a really terrific person, according to Donald Trump.
Well, exactly, but he's getting a bit of criticism, Ron DeSantis, because of the timing of when he's pulled out. Just a couple of days before the next vote, and only the second vote in this race, so people seeing it as a bit weak, but in particular, criticising the speed with which he's endorsed Donald Trump, not just after 18 months of saying he's not fit for office, of criticising him, but just days after he continued to criticise him when people thought he would still stand in this New Hampshire primary taking place tomorrow. Get this, Kay, just 6 days ago, he said, even the most worthless Republicans are getting Trump's praise because they're kissing the ring. You can't make it up. He did that 6 days after saying that.
Now, my prediction is that he's going to be his running mate. What do you think?
Well, amazing. We're talking about running mates already, and we haven't even had the second primary yet because of Trump's resounding victory in Iowa, and the focus already turning that way. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Clearly, this is a pivot by DeSantis, not DeSanctimonious, to try and be in a chance there. But I actually wonder, if Trump's victories in these primaries are so strong and his polling against Biden remains strong, maybe we'll go even closer to his loyalists and have a family member chosen. We'll see what happens, but it's hard for it to be DeSantis after the criticisms they have. We'll see. But the one thing I'd just add, Kay, is if there was a chance for Trump to lose, which looks unlikely, we needed it to have a single non-Trump candidate early in the primary race. We do actually have that now. Head-to-head, Trump v. Haley. She's well behind that.
OK, let's see what happens. Look forward to seeing you from 10. Thanks so much indeed, Will. Thanks. Quick look at the weather. It's terrible today.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A very, very brief respite between Storm Isha leaving and the next low-pressure system arriving tomorrow, bringing a second dose of strong winds and heavy rain. The amber wind warnings have just expired, but it will still be a windy start to the day. Blustery showers will blow in from the west, with some being heavy and thundery. Those over the higher ground of Scotland are likely to turn wintry.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Steph's with a Storm Isha.
Yes.
Mean, wasn't it?
It was really mean. I mean, it gave us winds 99 miles an hour, was the strongest we saw.
Yeah.
But for some places, just to put it in context, it was the strongest gust that we've seen for about 10 years. So it was incredibly strong, and it covered such a huge area as well.
It did, didn't it? And the whole country, which is quite unusual, apparently.
It is quite unusual. Usually you get amber warnings sort of just over northwest Scotland or over the southeast or something like that. But this was right the way across from top to bottom. So we all got it this time.
Yeah.
Massively so. You look at the number of flights cancelled across Northern Ireland, flights diverted from Scotland to Germany, flights in the Midlands kind of bounced around to Manchester, for example, ferries, Calmac, no service there this morning, railway lines, pretty much everywhere, warning of disruption.
And the government's saying, oh, ring 105.
Yeah,
What's 105? I've never heard of 105.
Yeah, I tend to get updates on these things through my allotment WhatsApp group. Everyone posting shed is blown over or something like that. But I'm a bit concerned for my scarecrows this morning.
OK, what about the odd trampoline that might have landed in there? See, it's always a trampoline that's either on the line or whatever.
Always. People asking, where's my trampoline on the WhatsApp groups?
There was a greenhouse that blocked the line at Westgate-on-Sea, and it was entire. If you see the pictures of it, the glass is still in place, but it has drifted across the railway
Greenhouse
line.
on the line.
So greenhouse, the wrong kind of greenhouse on the line.
Yeah, exactly. This tree fell on somebody's car. Thankfully, they were not in it at the time. We've not heard of any loss of life, thankfully, at the moment. But there's more storms coming out. This is the 9th named storm already.
Yes, and more to come, because we've got the jet stream set up now, and these things like to come in a conveyor belt one after the other. So the next one's coming tonight and into Tuesday.
OK, we'll bear that in mind. We will, of course, bring you the very latest right around the country. As you said, no train lines, no train services north of the border. For now, what's happening where you are, we are all around the country to bring you the very latest here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News CNC. everybody. It is 8 o'clock. On today's programme, we're talking about the widespread disruption from Storm Isha. We'll tell you about the damage.
Plus, amid measles warnings, a new appeal to parents to vaccinate their kids.
And Culture Secretary Lucy Frazer tells us she believes the BBC has on occasion been biased. You'll want to hear our exchange with her.
So they will.
Don't hide behind the sofa. Monday, the 22nd of January. Tens of thousands of homes without power and a tornado alert as 99-mile-an-hour winds batter parts of the UK and Ireland. Travel disruption with trains, ferries and flights cancelled. We'll bring you the latest weather and travel disruptions from across the UK. We're live in New Haven and also central London. Could postal services be reduced to alternate days as union bosses warn it could threaten tens of thousands of jobs?
I think people across the country will be concerned about that. But I'm sure there are many factors that have got to be taken into account.
Was this a hint at what's to come from Donald Trump as Ron DeSantis bows out of the White House race to throw his support behind his Republican rival?
I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
A whistleblower who resigned from Greater Manchester Police tells Sky News that the force's failures have left children at risk. Religious fault line. The Indian Prime Minister opens a contentious Hindu temple built on the ruins of an ancient mosque. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Our top story for you this morning is the disruption caused by Storm Isha. 99-mile-an-hour winds, tornado alerts, tens of thousands without power and widespread travel delays and cancellations. Alice Porter has more.
Unstoppable and unrelenting. Storm Isha made its mark here on the west coast of Scotland, but its power is being felt right across the UK. And with the destruction,
due to severe weather, all passenger services will be suspended.
Came severe disruption on land, sea and air. With gusts reaching over 90 miles per hour, there were cancellations, delays and diverted flights.
I suspect we won't end up flying back to Bristol because the risk is just too much, really.
These passengers, bound for Gatwick, diverted instead to Paris, having to board late-night coaches back to London.
The plane started going up, down, sideways, and I actually thought we were going to meet our makers. So everyone kind of remained calm until the pilot suddenly pulled up the thruster and we realised that we weren't going to land.
Trees falling on train tracks, spelling chaos for commuters. Like this one near Glasgow, which sparked a small fire. There's also been less typical obstacles. This is the 9th storm of the season, but it's unique for covering all corners of the country. And just beyond the UK, Ireland is feeling the weight of this storm. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power. The worst of Storm Isha may be over, but its effects will be felt for some time to come. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, Alice is with us now, along with Ashna. Alice, to you, first of all, big problems on the trains this morning. Good morning to work from home, I guess.
Yeah, I think that would be the message that a lot of people will need to hear today. It's going to be a particular problem in Scotland as well, because ScotRail has suspended all train services for the foreseeable future, and that's having an enormous impact across our whole network. I've just gone and had a look at the arrivals and departures board, and the problem is that there's been cancellations from trains coming from Newcastle, coming from Peterborough, and so they are then late coming in to King's Cross. And in turn, because of the disruption north of the border, there's a the cancellation of a train to Edinburgh. But really, when it comes to travel, the disruption that we've seen has been in the skies. There's been some extraordinary footage emerging over the last 12 hours or so of planes that have been unable to land because those winds were more than 90 miles per hour. If we take here in London, at London City Airport, yesterday 45% of departures had to be cancelled because of those high winds. And again, on the roads, we're going to see a huge impact from the storms. We know up in Cumbria, for example, there were a number of overturned lorries because of the conditions on the roads. Now, that was less of a problem yesterday because it was a sleepy Sunday evening, but today it's back to business on a Monday morning, and that's unfortunately going to have a big impact on commuters across the country.
Absolutely. And Ashna, I know you're down in New Haven. Gusts of 99 miles an hour in Northumbria near Alnwick Castle last night. What's it looking like where you are? Oh, still incredibly blustery. I hope you've got your big coat on.
I've got my big coat on, Kay, but it's not doing very much to protect me, certainly from the waves behind me that are whipping up, and breaking over occasionally, 4 foot high. And that wind warning, as you mentioned, is in place and blanketing, really, much of the UK. It's bringing with it a serious risk of tornadoes, according to the Tornado and Storm Research Organisation. We could see isolated tornadoes in parts of England and Wales as well. But really, it's in these coastal areas which are still feeling the effects of it. Yes, 99 miles per hour winds were recorded overnight, but 54 miles per hour winds really having effect here in the southeast, with ferries between Newhaven and Dieppe in the north of France being affected, routes there cancelled yesterday, but also flights landing in nearby Gatwick Airport having to be diverted, not to airports across the UK, but to airports abroad, flights being redirected to places like Lyon and even Paris. So whether it's trees or trampolines, people here in the south coast really feeling the effects of things this morning. Only my neighbour this morning waking up to seeing half of her roof being partially taken off, and coming as a huge surprise. You know, much of these weather warnings were given to people in the north and the northeast of England. I don't think people here, even on the south coast, realised they would be affected as much as they have.
OK, for now, thanks. Obviously updating you on Operation Isha throughout, Storm Isha, I should say, throughout the course of the programme. I'm just reflecting, Rob, good morning, on the Minister in the last hour, and she wanted to stick it to the BBC.
Yeah, so this is the mid-term review that the government that has been carried out. And the sort of theme of it from the government's perspective is around impartiality and bias within the BBC, giving Ofcom more powers over parts of the BBC. But I think the direct question that you put to her was, do you think the BBC is biased? And I think she really struggled to come up with a solid answer of that, because her answer was around, well, people have complained that it's biased. But as you pointed out, like, perception is not the same thing as evidence.
Let's listen.
On occasion, it has been biased, yes.
In relation to what?
Well, this report isn't about incidents, but we have seen recently that it's had to apologise for its own reporting, for example, in relation to the attack in the hospital in Israel, so in Gaza.
What's the difference between mistake and bias, surely?
Well, there is a perception amongst the public that the BBC is biased, and as Culture Secretary, it's important that I look at that. I must say, these are issues that I have discussed with the BBC. They've taken on board.
Yeah, but I'm asking you about the evidence of bias. Where's the evidence?
The evidence of bias is what audiences believe is the content of the BBC and how they...
perception, that's not evidence. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evidence. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC, and the evidence in relation to that perception is that...
perception and evidence are different things.
The evidence from Ofcom, having done studies and questionnaires of the public, is that the BBC's ratings in relation to impartiality have gone down.
The problem is that by saying there are complaints about bias and that means it's bias, it takes no account of the content of the complaint. So if you get 50 complaints that the BBC is too right-wing and 50 complaints that the BBC is too left-wing, in which direction is the BBC biased?
Yeah.
And I think, I spent a good 10 years working in that corporation, and the level of scrutiny over single words sometimes in introductions, the same way the Sky does, in introductions. During the run-up to elections, I worked in a little local radio station. We measured to the minute how much each of the parties had on air in relation to the interviews or the clips or whatever. All corporations, certainly Sky and the BBC, put on a huge amount of effort into trying to give balanced coverage.
It infuriates me that people suggest they jump on the hobby horse that the BBC is biased. Our colleagues at the BBC work their socks off to make sure that they are not biased, and just to be able to have a pop at them, and they think, even the government now having a pop at them, I think it's completely inappropriate. You may have noticed that from my interview.
Very much so. The only evidence was there was seemingly no evidence.
Well, there we are.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let's bring you some of the day's other stories now. The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, has endorsed his Republican Party rival Donald Trump for president in this year's US election. That's after pulling out of the race. It ends a bitter feud that had largely defined the 2024 campaign.
Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear.
I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
Let's get more with our US correspondent, James Matthews.
There was a time when Ron DeSantis was the hottest ticket in the Republican movement, the biggest danger to Donald Trump. But like others before him and around him, he simply couldn't live with the party's big beast. The wider American audience didn't buy his strategy that was built around culture wars. They weren't too keen on DeSantis himself, the anti-woke warrior. He says he's quit because he couldn't see a clear path to success. I think it's fair to say he couldn't see the funds sustaining a long-term challenge. Donors threw tens of millions of dollars at last week's Iowa caucus, the first verdict of the voters, and it's fair to say that the numbers for DeSantis didn't represent a good investment. The question in the immediate term is what happens to the DeSantis vote? How does that decant into the contest that he's left behind? It's probably fair to say it cuts two ways. Donald Trump occupies similar territory to DeSantis on the right of the Republican movement. He will pick up votes. Nikki Haley is left as the sole contender chasing voters who want to see a Trump alternative. She needs the votes the most. A poll yesterday for CNN showed her 11 percentage points behind Donald Trump. She needs to do well in New Hampshire, otherwise she'll be left confronting the same kinds of choices confronted by DeSantis before he pulled out.
And just a reminder, tune in tonight to watch our brand new programme discussing the latest international news with a host of big names shaping the global outlook. That's The World with Yalda Hakim at 9 p.m.
Looking forward to that. New programme from Yalda, and she'll be joining us in the final hour of the breakfast show to tell us all about it. Looking forward to it.
Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester airports are set to miss the June the 1st government deadline to install new security cameras. The new machines will end the 100ml limit on liquids in hand luggage. Representatives at the airports say they need more time. Dozens of people are missing in China after a landslide hit the mountainous Yunnan province early on Monday. Another 200 people were evacuated and 18 houses were destroyed. Rescue efforts are underway.
I thought you'd finished talking, that's why I was ranting on. I do beg your pardon.
But I agree with you, it was going to be a fantastic programme.
Yeah, really
Absolutely
looking forward to it. Great set as well. She's joining us in the 9 o'clock hour. Meantime, Jason's here. He's going to tell us more about a whistleblower in particular at Greater Manchester Police. What's going on?
Yeah, remember last week there was a report that came out that basically said that Greater Manchester Police in the Rochdale grooming case had made multiple failings. There'd been previous reports about Oldham, about South Manchester, and the Chief Constable came out in a press conference and said that lessons had been learned. But then in quite a bombshell moment, Maggie Oliver, who was the whistleblower in Rochdale, stood up and said, actually, I've been speaking to a whistleblower who says that there are still failings in Greater Manchester. She was part of a child protection unit and she left because she feels that she's failing the children that she's there to protect. And we have spoken to that whistleblower, and here's what she had to say.
I don't think we're making things better for these kids. In fact, I think we're making it worse. I don't think this child protection unit is fit for purpose. Many of the children have reported multiple disclosures of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect and psychological torture. And this is what professionals have called some of the worst abuse they've ever seen. I wanted to go and see them regularly, but the time just wasn't made available to me. And so you'd go and speak to them, you'd bring it all back up, re-traumatise them, and then you'd leave them hanging.
And what were your superiors saying back to you?
You just got a lot of shoulder shrugging, you know, sort of, it's out of my hands sort of thing. I had a Teams meeting with the DCI. Oh, you know, he's making all these promises to me. I'll get you the resources. It just didn't happen. I know that the superintendent level knew about this, so it goes that far up. You start to realise it doesn't matter how far you go up, no one's going to listen.
Well, Greater Manchester Police say that Lucy's concerns are being looked at a senior level. They say there have been huge increases in the number of people working in child protection, and they added, we can confirm that the children in question had been subject to safeguarding arrangements for several years before reports of non-recent abuse were made. They add that they were protected and are all safe and well and have been throughout the course of the investigation. A team of 4 officers continue to investigate. 2 suspects remain under investigation, and reviews have been taking place every 6 weeks since January 2023. And here's what the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnam, had to say.
I am absolutely determined that this review completes its work. It's not, I don't think, a contradiction. There have been changes within Greater Manchester Police. I have put the funding together to establish a force-wide child sexual exploitation unit. However, the question is it yet good enough? And clearly, when you hear allegations like this, you know that there's further to go.
And this whistleblower is saying, you know, that there's more than 2 suspects in her view, that there are more people who are potentially at risk. She says this has taken 7 years, and she describes it as a failure. And another failure, of course, is that not only is she saying that a paedophile ring is still at large, but that this officer who was investigating it has left the force because she felt she wasn't able to protect those children.
I did say more money available if necessary.
That's what Andy Burnham said, speaking to you earlier, yes.
Yes, he did. More of your report later on throughout the day here on Sky News and also online.
Yeah.
Thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There'll be a brief respite between Storm Isha leaving and the next low-pressure system arriving tomorrow, bringing a second dose of strong winds and heavy rain. The amber wind warnings have just expired, but it will still be a windy start to the day. Blustery showers blowing in from the west, with some being heavy and also thundery. Those over the higher ground of Scotland are likely to turn wintry.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, Ofcom will be outlining options for reforming Royal Mail's service obligations this week, with possible modifications to first and second class delivery targets. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, said people will find it troubling.
I think people across the country will be concerned about that. But I'm sure there are many factors that have got to be taken into account, and that's not something I personally have been looking at.
No, but you have a view, don't you? I mean, you're a member of the public as well, and you get your post every day at the moment. The suggestion is it'll be every other day. Would that cause you any problems, challenges, or are you more of an email person?
Well, I think we all get our news and our deliveries and communications from others in a whole range of ways. I know that this will be troubling for some people, but as I said, this isn't something that I'm looking at in my department.
We're not going to sit back and allow Ofcom, Royal Mail, the government, to destroy what is an important public service, which customers still support, and which you can actually expand upon with new products and services. So we're very concerned.
Let's put that to Steve Reid, Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Would Labour be content with a postal service every other day, like they do in some places in Europe?
No, I think it's very worrying. There's a universal service obligation. Wherever you live in this country, you should get a regular postal service. I think that's still an important part of the infrastructure of our country, and it's very worrying to hear these proposals.
The Culture Secretary on the programme earlier said that she thinks the BBC is biased. Do you?
Well, I think strengthening governance of the BBC and oversight seems to me uncontroversial. It's important that the country's major public service broadcaster is impartial, and the proposals that have come forward, I think, I don't think that they would be particularly controversial, no.
Do you think the BBC is impartial?
Broadly, myself, I don't think it's particularly biased. Not more than other broadcasters would be, but it's under...
Whoa, are you suggesting that we're biased?
Of course not.
Good, just checking.
Never your show, never Sky, of course.
Yes.
But, it's in a different category, isn't it? Because it's funded by taxpayers' money. So I think strengthening oversight of the BBC to make sure that everybody watching it has good reassurance that it will remain impartial is very important for the BBC being able to continue with public consent doing the good job that I think it does.
Do you think some channels are biased? News channels?
Well, channels are going to have their own perspectives on the news, and that's what happens in a free society. So I don't have a problem with that. The difference with the BBC is it's funded by people who pay the licence, and they deserve to have it impartial. It's not privately owned, and that makes it very different to other broadcasters.
Yeah, although we're all governed by Ofcom, apart from the BBC,
That's right.
although they may well be going forward. You want to talk to me about rubbish, sewage today?
Sewage, that's...
I was thinking of other words I could use at breakfast time.
Yeah, you have to be careful at this time of day when people are eating their breakfast.
Yeah.
But, I mean, people will be aware of the problem. We've got the highest levels of recorded illegal discharges of sewage into our waterways, our rivers, our lakes and our seas. But we had some researchers looking at how much water bosses had paid themselves in bonuses in recent years. And since the general election in 2019, they've paid themselves £25 million in bonuses and incentives while overseeing not just failure, but illegal activity on the scale that your viewers will be aware of. It's not right that should continue. Now, Labour wants to put the water industry under special measures so we can clear it up, but a key plank of that will be giving the regulator the power they need to ban water bosses paying themselves huge bonuses in this way while they're overseeing illegal failure on this level.
Much of our water industry is owned by foreign ownership. Should it be brought back into public control?
Regulation, for me, is the right way forward, strengthening regulation, because you can do it faster. If we were to look at nationalising the water industry, it could cost up to £90 billion to buy out the current owners, and where on earth are we going to find the money to do that? But it could also take years to unravel the current model of ownership, and during that time...
So you would do it in a perfect world, but you just can't
do
it?
No. I mean, I believe that strengthening the powers of the regulator will clean up the water industry. There's no need to... I don't think ownership is the issue. I think it's regulation. If the regulator had more power to stop the water bosses paying themselves tens of millions of pounds in bonuses, that money could instead be spent on fixing the broken infrastructure, which is the reason that we're seeing increasing levels of toxic sewage pumped into our rivers, causing all the damage they do to wildlife habitats, to tourism. People are worried now to take their kids down to the beach for a paddle in case their kids get sick. That is not how this country should be.
Talk to me about the situation that we've highlighted again via our Jason Farrell in Greater Manchester. A whistleblower has stepped back from her job looking after kids at Greater Manchester Police, trying to look after kids, because she doesn't think there's enough money to be able to do her job properly, and she thinks that there is a paedophile ring still operating in Greater Manchester.
Well, I think these claims have to be taken incredibly seriously, because there's nothing more important we do as a society than protect vulnerable children from the monsters that want to abuse them in this way. Now, I hear what's being said, and I've heard it myself. I have members of my family who work in child protection, and they say similar things. Now, what Labour is proposing is that we need to increase the number of police. You can pay for 13,000 additional police and PCSOs by tying up procurement across the different forces, so we can free up the money that would be saved to pay for extra officers. If you've got that, you make the system work far better. But I think it goes beyond that. I used to lead a council myself. We had to clear up the mess from historic child abuse. Getting different parts of the public sector to work more closely together and share data is another key aspect of protecting children and keeping them safe.
Just while I've got you, Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, has invited Keir Starmer to meet and establish a working relationship ahead of the next general election. Interested?
Well, I'm sure Keir Starmer will be prepared to speak to other people in politics, but he's specifically ruled out any deal with the SNP. Labour believes we can win a majority of seats across the UK, including in Scotland, and we'll be working towards a majority at the next general election.
What if you need their help?
Well, Keir's ruled out working with the SNP. We're going for a majority. If we weren't in a majority, then the Labour Party aims to govern the entire United Kingdom. You would not invite into that a party that wants to break our country apart.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Focusing on the BBC, again, we were chatting not only to Labour but also to the government in the form of the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, earlier today to talk about whether or not the BBC is biased or impartial. She seemed to get herself in knots a little bit, I would suggest, Rob, this morning, the Minister.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot in this midterm review that, as Steve Reid just said there, is relatively uncontroversial.
Yeah.
There's stuff about, you know, the amount of power the BBC board has over the complaints process and things like that. That is very processy. I guess the thing is, it tends to get dressed up when it's reported as more of a kind of political attack, if you like. And I guess the reason why that matters is that in the coming years, there will be negotiations towards the full charter renewal, and that's when you get into the really meaty discussions around things like the future of the licence fee and how the BBC is funded. But, I mean, that's not for a few years yet, so that will depend a lot completely on who wins the next election.
Yeah, but it doesn't dictate whether or not the BBC News is impartial, and the Minister's suggesting that she had examples of the BBC being biased.
And as you pointed out, there's a difference between mistakes, genuine mistakes, and bias, which is, you know, defined as a sort of innate prejudice. And to, I guess, accuse someone of making a mistake is a whole different thing to saying innately you are favouring one point of view.
OK, Rob, for now, thanks so much indeed. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News this Monday morning. Jack and Sam will be here to discuss their latest podcast as Sir Keir Starmer prepares for a major Labour Party civil society summit. What does that mean? As parents are urged to book MMR jabs that their children have missed, I'll speak to a doctor about the severity of measles outbreaks across the country. And we'll get a live update on Storm Isha, which has disrupted power and transport networks right across the UK and Ireland.
That has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides. And it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Triple E has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we will be joined by Sky's Sam Coates and Politico's Jack Blanchard for what to expect on their podcast, Politics at Jack and Sam's. And after decades of dispute, the Indian Prime Minister opens a new temple on a site running through India's religious fault line. And as authorities warn of there's more, the growing health risk in the face of falling vaccination rates. We'll be speaking to Dr. Emeka. All of that to come. Before that, though, the weather. Flipping it last night.
Yes, it was rattling in London, and we were about the one part of the country that wasn't covered by that amber warning, weren't we? And it's settled down, but we've been hearing through the course of this morning more to come with regards to that wind into Tuesday and Wednesday
99 miles an hour up near Alnwick Castle. That's impressive.
And a very impressive part of the world. That coastline is absolutely stunning.
It is stunning, yeah.
The Needles down in the south, 86. In the middle, Capel Crewing in Wales, 90 miles an hour. And at one point, warnings of severe danger to life. Hardly surprising when you look at those figures.
Yeah, although I think I'm right in saying certainly at this stage that we haven't had any reports of loss of life, thankfully. But you can see the shots here from North Ayrshire overnight. Lots of problems for planes trying to land.
Yeah, I was just reading about one plane that was going from Manchester to Dublin, so a relatively short hop, ended up in northern France because they couldn't land in Ireland, and then another one that ended up at Paris and Charles de Gaulle. We heard of one flight trying to land at Edinburgh, ending up in Germany as well. One travel expert described it as an extraordinary night for those kind of
Edinburgh
diversions.
and ended up in Germany?
Ended up in Cologne, Germany, yes. Yeah, planes really being diverted here, there and everywhere.
Wow, yeah, and this is what's happening at the train stations. Oh, that's the airport, I should say. Train stations, big problems as well. There are no trains, Scottish trains, for the rush hour this morning, so do bear that in mind. Big problems also at London Euston, for the Avanti West Coast, King's Cross as well, and power cuts, not only in Northern Ireland, but also in the Republic.
Yes, and thoughts of the people who have to go and climb power poles and cables and stuff in
big shout out to you guys and girls.
Stormy weather. Incredibly technical skill in the first place, but to then do it on days like today, massive shout out, like you say. Well, let's remind you of that top story this morning. Storm Isha has unleashed heavy rain and potentially deadly winds throughout the course of the night across the UK and Ireland. Millions of us being told this morning that travel is being badly disrupted throughout the day and further on into the week. Ofcom will be outlining options for reforming Royal Mail's service obligations this week, with possible modifications to first and second class delivery targets. Some modifications might include moving to alternate day deliveries and abolishing Saturday deliveries. The Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has endorsed his Republican Party rival Donald Trump for president in this year's US election. That's after pulling out of the race himself. It ends a bitter feud that had largely defined the 2024 campaign so far. A whistleblower who resigned from Greater Manchester Police has told Sky News that the force's child protection unit where she worked is not fit for purpose, and she believes that failures have left a paedophile ring at large for at least 7 years.
More on the storms now. Let's bring in our team. Should we standing by for us, Ashna and also Alice. Ashna, to you first of all this time. We've sent you to the coast. What's it like where you are?
Oh, it's pretty blustery here, Kay. No let-up for those here in the southeast. Of course, I'm down by the coast, so I'm going to be feeling the extraordinary weather event a little bit more than other people. An interesting fact to bring you, which I thought was quite telling of how ferocious the winds were last night. At 7:30 last night, 43% of the UK's electricity was being generated by wind. Doesn't that give you such a picture of really how strong these winds have been? And also the waves too. I'm glancing over my shoulder occasionally, because where I am, you see some of these waves crashing over in excess of 4 foot. They are breaking over the promenade occasionally. There have been a number of dog walkers out and about trying to make the most of these conditions. But of course, the advice last night was very much to stay out of this wind. 99 per hour with the wind speeds that were being recorded in the north of England up by Northumberland. But of course, now with that comes that risk of tornadoes. The Storm and Tornado Research Organisation warning people that they could see isolated tornadoes, and because of that, to stay away from windows because of potential flying debris.
OK, thank you. Alice is at one of our London railway stations for us this morning. Pretty bad up in Scotland. What is it like for the rest of the network?
Well, it's also really bad in the southeast of the UK, as Ashna was just describing there, and that's having a knock-on impact here. I've just gone and had a look at St Pancras, and the southeastern services down to Dover are really impacted. There are delays of about an hour and a half, but really the main delays we're seeing are up in Scotland, and that's because ScotRail has suspended its services during the rush hour period until at least noon today, while they try and work out just how bad the destruction was last night. We know there's been multiple trees that have fallen on the train lines. There's also been sheds, there's been greenhouses, all of which that have ended up on the train lines. And so that's having a knock-on impact. And I've had a look here at King's Cross at the arrivals board, and there's a number of delays and cancellations from trains that are coming in from the north of the country into London. But really where we've seen the worst travel disruption has been in the skies. London City Airport, for example, yesterday cancelled 45% of its departures, with many pilots having to do some very tricky landings.
OK, for now, thank you very much indeed, ladies both. Thank you. We'd like your thoughts on this too. And your stories, get in touch by scanning the QR code. There you go. Where is it? There it is, bottom of your screen, Kay Burley or Gareth Barlow. Let us know. Now, time for a deep dive into events here at Westminster. Who better to do that with than Jack and Sam? Hi.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you? Did you see the Minister this morning?
I heard she did really well on your show, Kay, and had a great time, and we'll all be enjoying the clips again and again through the day. Something like that?
Yeah, along those lines. Sam, where are you, Sam?
I'm in the home counties, a few miles outside London, following around Rishi Sunak this morning.
OK, tell me about what we can expect in the podcast. You start, Sam.
So this week, the government are trying to get off the subject of Rwanda and onto, well, anything else. Probably the economy and tax cuts is one of their top subjects to talk about. They're also talking about the BBC, as Lucy Frazer attempted to do, perhaps not that successfully on your show, about an hour ago. I have to say, there are some people in government scratching their heads when it comes to trying to work out what the government are doing when it comes to tax cuts. There's 5 weeks until the March 6th budget, yet the Prime Minister and the Chancellor writing at the weekend are raising expectations incredibly high before it's clear that the government even has that much money to spend. Yes, there'll probably be maybe a 1 or 2p cut on the basic rate of income tax when Jeremy Hunt stands up in a few days' time. But, you know, they're announcing, they seem to be signalling this hard, quite a long way in advance. There is a sense amongst some that they're not sure this government has got a lot to say.
Yeah, stand by, because, as I said, your mucker wants to get a word in edgeways in the form of Jack. Whose house were you at?
We're at my house yesterday.
Were there biscuits?
There was cake.
Cake?
I've upped the ante. Yeah, really good cake from... We've got a little baker's on our high street that's been there for about 100 years, and they make this really good Madeira cake, bit of jam.
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
It's good. I'll bring you some in if you
might have to cheer up Jeremy Hunt, according to what I was listening to in your podcast, suggesting that he might not be Chancellor for much longer.
Well, that's the speculation. The truth is we don't really know, but there's a certain type of Tory MP who is standing down at the next election. They've been there a while, they've done the good jobs. He's not going to get a better job than Chancellor. He might be looking at the polls and thinking, don't much fancy this, and therefore there is speculation that he might not see this one out. And if you were going to stand down in the next election, you could hardly go into that election as Chancellor saying, vote for my financial plan, oh, but I won't be here to see it. So until they can really put that speculation to bed, people will continue to talk about it. Downing Street so far have only said he'll be here until the budget. As Sam just told you, that's in a few weeks' time. We'd like to know what happens after that.
Yeah, quick clip from the podcast.
He's going to be talking about essentially what we used to call, because you and I, Sam, are veterans of early 2010s politics, the big society. David Cameron's big idea that as he cut the hell out of the British state, somehow charities and volunteers and helpful people would sort of fill the gap, which was a lovely idea, but unfortunately didn't quite do the job as far as austerity was concerned.
He's not endorsing the big society as the Tories put it, as far as I understand. Basically, his argument is that the Tories thought it was a substitute for an active state, no, not big government, but active government, and business and community partnerships, which is where the Labour Party think they are. So expect to hear a lot about churches and communities coming together.
Look at you, two dressed down Sunday. Sam, you're talking about Keir Starmer's speech, are you?
That's right. I mean, the thing that really grabbed my attention about Keir Starmer's speech is that, and this doesn't happen very often, but he's engaging in a bit of a culture war on the other side to the Conservatives. So he's saying he's standing by. He's supporting a couple of institutions that have been in the crosshairs of the Tory right and the right-wingers in recent months. One is the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which, of course, Nigel Farage was attacking for being a sort of taxi service for people coming over in small boats. You know, Keir Starmer says we've got to work with that kind of group. Similarly, the National Trust, who's kind of look again at the sort of slavery and the cultural implications of some of the things in their properties, led by Tory MPs. You know, Keir Starmer saying this is mad, this is an attempt to find wokery and denounce it. And now for once, and I think this is a sign of his confidence, Keir Starmer saying he's coming down on the side of these institutions doesn't mean a lot in policy terms, but in political terms, it does give us a sort of wedge, a division to chew over.
OK, House of Lords, once again, in the spotlight. Lord Goldsmith on in a sec.
That's right. So it wouldn't be a week can't go by without us mentioning the word Rwanda at the moment, can we? The government obviously got its bill through the Commons finally last Wednesday night, which now headed for the House of Lords. That's not happening this week, but before it arrives, the Lords are debating a motion today on whether or not they should ratify the treaty that the government signed with Rwanda, or whether they should wait until they're sure that Rwanda is a safe country for people to be sent to. It's not actually going to change anything today, but we'll start to get a sense of where the House of Lords is at on this. We'll hear the debates, we'll hear people popping up and complaining about things, and we'll start to get a sense of just how much trouble this bill is going to have when it does arrive there in another week or two's time.
Okay. Why are you not here, Sam?
Well, I mean, there are very few people, Kay, I would, you know, miss you for, but I think I ought to be seeing the Prime Minister if there's an opportunity.
Oh, that's impressive, isn't it?
Well, was that how you'd want to spend your Monday morning, chasing the Prime Minister around in a storm? I don't know. I think I quite like the studio.
And where can we see the podcast?
The podcast is wherever you get your podcast. Spotify, Apple, the Sky app, of course, the Politico website, every Sunday night, seeing you up for the week ahead in Westminster.
Look forward to... I've listened to it. It's definitely the best podcast out there. You know I've said this before, and I'm not just blowing wind up your skirt. It's actually the fact. Although, if he doesn't come in the studio again next week, then there'll be hell on.
Yeah, we'll get him back.
OK, and maybe cake, do you think?
I'll bring the cake. It's
Excellent.
a deal.
It's a deal. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Good luck, Sam. Hopefully you'll track him down and we'll hear more from the Prime Minister a little bit later on. Brilliant. Thank you. Meantime, let's take you to India. Why not? The Prime Minister has formally opened a controversial Hindu temple, which was built on the ruins of a historical mosque. Let's get more, should we? And joining us now is Neville. There he is. Hi, Neville. We had some fantastic music behind you last time. What's going on? Tell us more.
Oh, you can't miss the music. It's all over town. Well, this is one of the most controversial and contentious issues of modern India. We've this very site on which the temple is being made. Hindus believe it's the birthplace of Ram, but there it stood almost for 500 years. A mosque built in 1528. Now this mosque was pulled down in 1992 by right-wing mobs. Thousands of them descended on this town, pulled it down because they were not getting making entry into what they consider the birthplace of Lord Ram, a very important god in the Hindu pantheon. And since then, it's been in a court case. In 2019, the Supreme Court of India awarded, or in its judgment, gave the Hindus the possession or the ownership of this land, and we've seen now this grand temple being constructed. It is what the right-wing organizations and Prime Minister Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party that has been fighting for. They have promised to build this for decades, and now it's all happened. He will surely garner support and get more votes when there are elections in the summers, in the next few months.
OK, for now, thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you Monday morning here on Sky News, why millions of parents in England are being urged to book their children for MMR jabs. We'll be joined by our resident doctor. And we'll get a live update on Storm Isha, which has disrupted power and transport networks right across the UK and Ireland.
The reason I'm doing for those selfless veteran who goes through, ex-serviceman goes through all PTSD, anxiety, depression, and then to support them, in whichever level I could do it. And then since I'm involved in a little bit of charity, so I felt like, why not I do some walking challenge myself, so which I've started 3,000 miles.
8 mile is for one of those veterans.
Thank you. That's where 3,000 miles came out.
From PTSD. And you're going to be walking around the whole of London, all the London boroughs.
All the London boroughs.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Great. We started just 2 days ago. This is my 3rd day. I'm going to cover every borough. And there are other various places as well, like a Lord's Cricket ground. They have already came to us. There are a team of people, 4 or 5, from even the combat straight, and then from my side as well. So they are managing the diary. So my job is just they will tell me where to go, and then I'll just go and walk, to be honest.
Can people walk with you?
Yes, they are.
So how do they find out where you're going to be on any given day?
Great. We have a website called Sujan Katwal 3,000 Miles Challenge. So they can find us and they can follow me. And then through that, wherever I'm going, we always put it update in our social media, like tomorrow where I will be. That way they can find us.
And what about if people want to donate money to help?
Same as it's in that page, 3,000 Miles.
You have a GoFundMe page.
GoFundMe page. Yeah. It's controlled by Combat Stress Charity.
Yes.
They are and they will update everything. My job is to be honest, just to walk.
Hello again, everybody. Time now to talk to Wilf to see what's caught his eye today. I'm guessing the situation with the US politics is something on your mind. Wilf, morning.
Good morning to you, Kay. Yes, so of course, the day before the New Hampshire primary, the second in this Republican race to select their candidate, or in fact 2 days before, yesterday, Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, who 6 months ago, 12 months ago, was the clear person expected to challenge Donald Trump the closest, has pulled out of the race. And not only has he pulled out of the race after only one of these votes, Iowa last week, just ahead of the second vote, New Hampshire tomorrow, he's done so and endorsed Donald Trump, who he criticised just days before, all in the same breath, which is why he is getting quite a lot of criticism for being spineless and weak and, of course, probably fishing for some kind of Trump endorsement down the line now.
OK, so where does this leave the only female in the race? Could we still potentially see the first ever female president?
Well, there's a lot of ifs there and a lot of hurdles for her to get over first. But I think the most important thing is not whether she's the only female in the race. She is the only challenger left in this Republican race to Donald Trump. And her chances are low just to get the Republican nomination. But in order for it to have not been Trump, we did need early on, before, say, Super Tuesday, before lots of the other primaries and caucuses, to have one single candidate for the non-Trump base within the Republican Party to corral behind. Now, if I was anything to go by where he didn't just get a plurality of votes, he got a majority, then that's an incredibly hard task. But at least her chances, even though DeSantis didn't endorse her, probably actually ticked up a fraction over the weekend because she's the only challenger to Trump now. But from a very low base, that improvement in her chances.
OK, well, we'll see you from 10. Thanks very much indeed. I was just saying good morning. You probably caught me there on camera to Dr. Emeka. Hi. It's
Hi,
good
how
to
you doing?
See you. I'm really well. Measles. Is it a problem?
Well, yes, unfortunately, it is a problem. So the UK HSA had declared a national incident because of the rise in cases of measles over the last coming years and the drop in vaccine uptake, especially in inner cities such as London and Birmingham around the West Midlands, which is unfortunate. I think we've seen that from the statistics in the last 3 years, the incidence of measles is going up. So I think last year it was 1,603 cases, up from 700 the year before, up from 360 the year before.
Measles had been eradicated.
Yeah, so
what's happened?
Around 2016, 2017, it was declared that measles were eradicated because at least we had uptake of around 95% of children under the age of 5 were getting both their doses of the vaccines. But I think since the pandemic, because of vaccine hesitancy, also lack of trust potentially in the NHS, people just not knowing, example, misinformation around the internet, people are getting vaccinated less, and so we're seeing more cases.
And the problem for some is that there's a pork product in the vaccination.
Oh, yes. So there are two types of measles vaccines, MMR vaccines, available. And one of them has porcelain gelatin in it. And for certain peoples of certain religious groups, obviously, they don't want to take
vegans.
this. Yeah, or vegans, they don't want to take this vaccine for spiritual or personal reasons, unfortunately. But for these people, they can be offered the other choice of the MMR vaccine. So it is important that their kids are getting...
Priorix,
Yes, I think that's the name of it.
Yeah, and also there was some concern about a previous study back in 1998, Andrew Wakefield. He was subsequently struck off by the British Medical Association, but not before. He caused all sorts of issues.
Yeah, so he came out with a study that linked the MMR vaccine, which is the vaccine for measles, mumps and rubella, to children developing autism, a neurodevelopmental disease. And so because of this, a lot of concerned mothers thought, oh, it's either measles or autism. Measles is a self-limiting viral disease, but autism is something that could affect my child for life. So I'm not going to take that risk. I'm not going to take the vaccine. And unfortunately, obviously, this led to a spike in measles being developed, contracted because it's so contagious. But then his study was later disproved and discredited. And we now know that we think it was for potential financial gain of single vaccines rather than having the combined MMR.
Yeah, although I'm not sure if I just need to say allegedly there. It's good
Indeed.
to see you, Doctor. Thanks so much.
Cheers, very
much appreciated. Thank you. So, if your kids have not had their MMR vaccination, the doc says do it.
Looks definitely.
There you go. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There'll be a very brief respite between Storm Isha leaving and the next low-pressure system arriving tomorrow, bringing a second dose of strong winds and also heavy rain. The amber wind warnings have just expired, but it will still be a windy start to the day. Blustery showers will blow in from the west, with some being heavy and thundery. Those over the higher ground of Scotland are likely to turn wintry.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The gang are back in town, joined by Steph. The weather. Steph, morning.
It has been terrible, and it's all thanks to a jet stream that's now fired this storm straight towards us. That was our Storm Isha. We've got another low pressure coming tomorrow. Will that one be named? That's the big question now.
What's the name if it is going to be?
Jocelyn, if it is.
Jocelyn?
Oh, it's already been decided.
Yes, there's a list.
OK, Storm, I quite like that.
It's Kay afterwards, JK.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be Kay. I cause a storm every day, to be fair. I said it before you could.
I'm not saying anything, I'm just looking at stats about the weather.
Share them with us.
No, that's stats about MMR, that's not going to do us. We've been and done that. Let's move on to... 45,000 homes, give or take, maybe 48,500 homes Northern Ireland without power, North West England, Wales as well. Sellafield as well, notably suspending operations overnight, although it was said that there was no safety issues, but just for safety, shut down its operations overnight. And we're now hearing, aren't we, this morning, the big thing for commuters is, of course, travel. But I guess the working from home lifestyle maybe means that not as many people are affected as perhaps once were.
The government this morning talking about ringing 105. What's that about?
Yeah, that was...
Saying, well, what?
Steph, do you know anything about
What is this number?
It's not one I'm terribly well accustomed to either, to be honest. I was having a look through, though, some of the diversions that have been going on with planes as well overnight, because obviously it's really, really tricky conditions for pilots to land in. And there seemed to be one that had come from Turkey, was heading towards London and was attempted to land a couple of times there and then was sent back towards France. And then another that had come from Manchester direction towards Dublin, diverted to Belfast and eventually ended up in Liverpool. So people in the air for several hours for just...
One thing's for certain, you have to come down when you're on a plane, don't you?
Somewhere, yeah.
I have been in storms. Was it Storm Kira along 2 or 3 years ago? Storm Kira. And we were coming back from Iceland, Reykjavik, to come into London Heathrow. All like that, almost down. And then we had to do a go-around. Oh, didn't like that at all.
Bigger planes are better, though. That you don't want to be on a little one. They do wobble a bit more.
Yeah, I'm sure. How many storms have there been? What's the record in a season?
Oh, gosh, here,
Loads.
not sure. Lots.
Yeah.
Yes.
Loads. OK, so when will we know whether it's going to be Storm Jocelyn?
Later on today, probably the Met Office will issue a warning to make it an amber warning, and then we'll get a name for the storm.
OK.
If it happens.
Yeah, and lots of problems on the trains, though.
Lots of problems on the trains. If you are trying to get across Scotland this morning, don't bother on the trains. Also, the ferries as well, Calmac as well, lots of issues for those guys. And then also, just more broadly...
I'm just laughing because if you're trying to get across Scotland in a ferry, obviously there's strong winds somewhere.
Very much so. And also, more broadly, a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit on much of the railway network as well.
OK, so it's going to take a long time, even if you do manage to get there. Let us know your thoughts. Get in touch by scanning the QR code, which we will show you momentarily here on Sky News. Do stay tuned that way. morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock on today's programme. We're talking about the widespread disruption from Storm Isha. We'll tell you about the damage, won't we?
We certainly will. Plus, amid measles warnings, a new appeal to parents to vaccinate their kids.
Could postal services be reduced to alternate days? The Culture Secretary admits it could be troubling for some.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's Monday, the 22nd of January. Tens of thousands of homes without power and a tornado alert as 99-mile-an-hour winds batter parts of the UK and Ireland. Travel disruption with trains, ferries and flights cancelled. We'll bring you the latest weather and travel disruptions from across the UK. We're live in New Haven and also in central London. Ofcom's oversight of the BBC is set to be extended. The Culture Secretary told this programme she believes the BBC has, on occasion, been biased. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evident. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC.
Was this a hint at what's to come from Donald Trump as Ron DeSantis bows out of the White House race to throw his support behind his Republican rival?
And I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
A whistleblower who resigned from Greater Manchester Police tells Sky News that the force's failures have left children at risk. Religious fault line. The Indian Prime Minister opens a contentious Hindu temple built on the ruins of an ancient mosque. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Our top story this morning is the disruption caused by Storm Isha. 99-mile-an-hour winds, tornado alerts, tens of thousands without power and widespread travel delays and cancellations. Alice Porter has more.
Unstoppable and unrelenting. Storm Isha made its mark here on the west coast of Scotland, but its power is being felt right across the UK. And with the destruction,
due to severe weather, all passenger services will be suspended.
Came severe disruption on land, sea and air. With gusts reaching over 90 miles per hour, there were cancellations, delays and diverted flights.
I suspect we won't end up flying back to Bristol because the risk is just too much, really.
These passengers, bound for Gatwick, diverted instead to Paris, having to board late-night coaches back to London.
The plane started going up, down, sideways, and I actually thought we were going to meet our makers. So everyone kind of remained calm until the pilot suddenly pulled up the thruster and we realised that we weren't going to land.
Trees falling on train tracks, spelling chaos for commuters. Like this one near Glasgow, which sparked a small fire. There's also been less typical obstacles. This is the 9th storm of the season, but it's unique for covering all corners of the country. And just beyond the UK, Ireland is feeling the weight of this storm. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power. The worst of Storm Isha may be over, but its effects will be felt for some time to come. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, Alice and Ashna both out and about this morning. Alice, you are monitoring what's happening as far as the trains are concerned.
Yeah, that's right, and I've got some good news at last. The Avanti West Coast, their services up into Scotland should be resuming right now, so that is some good news. But on the other hand, I've also just gone and had a look at the departures board here at King's Cross, and a 9 o'clock service to Edinburgh has been cancelled because of an object that had fallen on overhead electric cables, and unfortunately I think it's going to have a knock-on effect for trains between Edinburgh and London throughout the rest of the day, and that's partly because the services with ScotsRail have been suspended because of the appalling weather we saw last night, and that's having a knock-on impact across the rail network, with Network Rail having to work through the night really to clear the debris that had fallen on the train tracks, fallen trees, but also greenhouses and sheds that had ended up in places where they shouldn't be. But really, I think some of the most extraordinary destruction we saw has impacted the skies, really, with airports all having been affected by those winds, which went over 90 miles per hour. Here in London, for example, London City Airport had to cancel 45% of its departures yesterday, and there's been some extraordinary videos circulating on social media over the last 12 hours of pilots who've attempted to land planes in some very difficult conditions, and in many cases simply weren't able to.
OK, for now, thank you. We decided to send Ashna to the coast. We told her to put a big coat on and she needed it. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, I'm definitely feeling the effects of Storm Isha. The worst of it may be over, as we've been told, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. If you're down on the coast today, if ever there was a day to work from home, today would absolutely be the day for it. Look, it was 99 miles per hour winds up in the north of England, but down here in the south, 54 miles per hour. Still felt extraordinary, and there have been some quite extraordinary images coming out from across the UK. That wind weather warning is in place till midday at the very least, affecting swathes of England, and certainly down here in the southeast, even driving along the M25, M23 today, the wind pummeling the cars and everyone in their vehicles desperately trying to steady themselves as they're driving down. It's absolutely a day, if you can't stay inside, for at least taking care out of the roads. We've also been warned to stay away from places like windows. The worry is that, of course, if there is this risk of isolated tornadoes, that really can whip up some debris which can fly into windows and smashing them. So people being urged to be safe, really, even though the worst may be over, there is still the effects of it still being felt.
OK, ladies, for now, thanks so much indeed. Let's also bring in Shingi Marariki, should we? He has the latest for us from Carlisle.
This weather has brought with it heavy rainfall, and we're by the River Eden, which at points has a number of flood warnings along it. That is because of the rain that has come in overnight, and we understand that on low-lying ground there's particular risk, with environmental agencies saying that they have deployed pumps, people and equipment to try and help people. And as I say, there are 30 weather warnings in place across the country, a number of them here in Cumbria where I am, which is unsurprising given that this is the county which is vast, rural and is home to the Lake District. But this kind of flooding on top of those high winds compounds what is a really difficult effort to help people get back on the grid. Electricity Northwest is saying hundreds of people are without power. The flooding makes it harder to reach those people in those communities on the back of what's already been a difficult month when it comes to flooding, with another named storm just weeks before this.
Meantime, Stephen Murphy has the latest update from Dublin.
The latest figures that we have here in the Republic of Ireland are for 170,000 ESB networks. That's the main utility here. The 170,000 homes and businesses without power this morning. So a major clean-up operation taking place right across Ireland. The Storm Isha tracked right across the island, and then north of the border. Currently this morning we're being told that around 48,500 people there are without power as well. More than 1,000 road blockages reported in Northern Ireland, which hinders those crews as they go around trying to find the power outages and replace them so that people can go about their business. Blustery, windy conditions as well will hinder that work as it continues throughout the day. But yeah, well over 200,000 people currently without any power this morning.
Let's talk about the BBC, should we, and the government's view. It's sort of like a halfway house, isn't it? The interim report, like a school report.
Yeah.
And the minister this morning suggesting that the BBC, in her opinion, has been biased on occasion.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this midterm review that's relatively uncontroversial about process and complaints and things like that. I guess it gets dressed up, though, in several papers this morning with a big focus on BBC impartiality and bias. And then when you spoke to Lucy Frazer, the Culture Secretary, this morning, she was pretty clear that on occasion she thought the BBC had been biased, but seemed to struggle a little bit more when it came to actually pointing out examples.
Yeah, let's have a listen.
On occasion, it has been biased, yes.
In relation to what?
Well, this report isn't about incidents, but we have seen recently that it's had to apologise for its own reporting, for example, in relation to the attack in the hospital in Israel, so in Gaza.
What's the difference between mistake and bias, surely?
Well, there is a perception amongst the public that the BBC is biased. And as Culture Secretary, it's important that I look at that. I must say, these are issues that I have discussed with the BBC. They've taken
but I'm
on
asking you
board
about the evidence of bias. Where's the evidence?
The evidence of bias is what audiences believe is the content of the BBC and
But that's
how
perception,
they...
that's not evidence. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evidence. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC, and the evidence in relation to that perception is that...
perception and evidence are different things.
The evidence from Ofcom, having done studies and questionnaires of the public, is that the BBC's ratings in relation to impartiality have gone down.
No doubt that was a tough watch, wasn't it? And
Not for me.
Not for you, no. But also just more broadly...
Why are you laughing?
Straight face, serious. More broadly, I can't help but also think as well that the BBC's funding constantly being eroded and eviscerated as a result of political decision-making. And then often politicians then go, well, the BBC's weakened, it's not doing what it should do, it's not doing it as well as it should do, etc., etc. And there's this potential for this very dangerous cycle where, as a result, because they think it's been weakened or not as good as it should be, less funding is attributed to it and potentially kind of a race to the bottom for the corporation.
I think it's reasonable to criticise the BBC on all sorts of levels, as and when you want to, but you cannot say that their journalists are not impartial, because in my opinion they are all very hard-working journalists, all the ones that I know, and I'm sure others that I don't as well, and it is inappropriate to suggest that they are biased.
So you had a Labour guest on afterwards that was pretty cautious about what he said about the BBC. Actually, a shadow minister from Labour, Thangam Debonaire's been a bit more bullish about it. She's posted that exchange with Lucy Frazer that you had, and said it's the latest in a long line of secretaries of state for the culture wars, attacking and undermining one of our greatest institutions. Instead of using the BBC as a punching bag, they should be supporting the BBC. I mean, that matters, I guess, because the full charter renewal will happen after the next general election. So what Labour make of it may well be very, very important in terms of their outlook on the BBC.
Yeah, and, talking about when it comes to the TV licence, that's a completely different thing. I get all of that, but don't say that our peers are biased when they are not, in my opinion. There you go.
Well, that's a fact. Now, let's bring you some of the morning's other news now. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has endorsed his Republican Party rival Donald Trump for president in this year's US election. That's after pulling out of the race himself. It ends a bitter feud that had largely defined the 2024 campaign.
Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear.
I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
Well, our US correspondent James Matthews has more details.
There was a time when Ron DeSantis was the hottest ticket in the Republican movement, the biggest danger to Donald Trump. But like others before him and around him, he simply couldn't live with the party's big beast. The wider American audience didn't buy his strategy that was built around culture wars. They weren't too keen on DeSantis himself, the anti-woke warrior. He says he's quit because he couldn't see a clear path to success. I think it's fair to say he couldn't see the funds sustaining a long-term challenge. Donors threw tens of millions of dollars at last week's Iowa caucus, the first verdict of the voters. And it's fair to say that the numbers for DeSantis didn't represent a good investment. The question in the immediate term is what happens to the DeSantis vote? How does that decant into the contest that he's left behind? It's probably fair to say it cuts two ways. Donald Trump occupies similar territory to DeSantis on the right of the Republican movement. He will pick up votes. Nikki Haley is left as the sole contender, chasing voters who want to see a Trump alternative. She needs the votes the most. A poll yesterday for CNN showed her 11 percentage points behind Donald Trump. She needs to do well in New Hampshire. Otherwise, she'll be left confronting the same kinds of choices confronted by DeSantis before he pulled out.
Just a reminder, tune in tonight to watch our brand new programme discussing the latest international news with a host of big names shaping the global outlook. That's The World with Yauda Hakim at 9 p.m. Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester airports are set to miss the June the 1st government deadline to install new security scanners. The new machines will end the 100ml limit on liquids in hand luggage. Representatives at the airport say they need more time. Ofcom will be outlining options for reforming Royal Mail service obligations this week, with possible modifications to first and second class delivery targets. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, said people will find it troubling. We also spoke to the union boss, Dave Ward.
I think people across the country will be concerned about that. But I'm sure there are many factors that have got to be taken into account, and that's not something I personally have been looking at.
No, but you have a view, don't you? I mean, you're a member of the public as well, and you get your post every day. At the moment, the suggestion is it'll be every other day. Would that cause you any problems, challenges, or are you more of an email person?
Well, I think we all get our news and our deliveries and communications from others in a whole range of ways. I know that this will be troubling for some people, but as I said, this isn't something that I'm looking at in my department.
We're not going to sit back and allow Ofcom, Royal Mail, the government to destroy what is an important public service which customers still support. And which you can actually expand upon with new products and services. So we're very concerned.
Dozens of people are missing in China after a landslide hit the mountainous Yunnan province early on Monday. Another 200 people were evacuated and 18 houses were destroyed. Rescue efforts are underway. Millions of parents in England are being urged to book their children in for any measles, mumps and rubella jabs that they may have missed. It's part of a major new NHS drive to protect children from soaring infection rates across the country.
Jason's here to talk to us about concerns, other concerns for youngsters in Greater Manchester.
Yeah, you remember, Kay, I was on your programme about this time last week, actually, talking about a new report that had come out which was critical of Greater Manchester's handling of the investigation in Rochdale into the grooming gangs. And it was off the back of two other reports that had been critical about Oldham and also grooming gang in South Manchester. And at the time, Steve Watson, the Chief Constable, said lessons have been learned since the 12 years that have passed since then. And then in a kind of bombshell moment, on came Maggie Oliver, who was the whistleblower from Rochdale, saying, no, actually, you're still failing. I've been speaking to a whistleblower who's just like me, but has only just left the force, and says that these failures to investigate these kind of crimes continue in Greater Manchester. And we have spoken to this whistleblower.
I don't think we're making things better for these kids. In fact, I think we're making it worse. I don't think this child protection unit is fit for purpose. Many of the children have reported multiple disclosures of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect and psychological torture, and this is what professionals have called some of the worst abuse they've ever seen. I wanted to go and see them regularly, but the time just wasn't made available to me. And so you'd go and speak to them, you'd bring it all back up, re-traumatise them, and then you'd leave them hanging.
And what were your superiors saying back to you?
You just got a lot of shoulder shrugging, you know, sort of, it's out of my hands sort of thing. I had a Teams meeting with the DCI. Oh, you know, he's making all these promises to me. I'll get you the resources. It just didn't happen. I know that the superintendent level knew about this, so it goes that far up. You start to realise it doesn't matter how far you go up, no one's going to listen.
Well, Greater Manchester Police have told us that they are reviewing Lucy's concerns at a very senior level. They say that they have increased the number of people now working in child protection to a significant level. They say we can confirm that the children in question had been subject to safeguarding arrangements for several years before reports of non-recent abuse were made. They say they were protected and are all safe and well and have been throughout the course of the investigation. A team of 4 officers continue to investigate. 2 suspects remain under investigation, and reviews have been taking place every 6 weeks since January 2023. And you spoke to Mayor Andy Burnam. Here's what he had to say.
I am absolutely determined that this review completes its work. It's not, I don't think, a contradiction. There have been changes within Greater Manchester Police. I have put the funding together to establish a force-wide child sexual exploitation unit. However, the question is it yet good enough? And clearly, when you hear allegations like this, you know that there's further to go.
And of course, he pledged to you that if he needed to, he would put more money into this issue. This whistleblower is saying that there has been a paedophile ring at large for 7 years, and she says that is a failure. And not only that, then you have her, the lead investigator on this, essentially saying, I can't cope with the fact that I'm failing these children. I'm going to have to lead the force. That's a very, very upsetting thought.
It certainly is. The mayor saying that if more money was needed, he would make it available. Let's see if it's as good as his word. For now, Jason, thanks very much. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill faces a test in the House of Lords today. We'll speak to Lord Goldsmith, who's one of those scrutinising it. And a live update on Storm Isha, which has disrupted power and transport networks right across the UK and Ireland.
And now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with Rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello again, everybody. You are very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Lord Goldsmith is with us this morning. He's just been pointing out that he's the other Lord Goldsmith, the original Lord Goldsmith.
Only because I'm older.
And more senior. Talk to me about the fact that Rwanda and the Rwanda bill will be debated again today in the House of Lords. What's going to happen?
Well, we've got a debate today on one point, which is that there's a report. I chair a committee called the International Agreements Committee, and our job is to scrutinise all new treaties the government enters into. And it could be trade treaties, they could be anything at all. This one we've looked at, and what we have to decide is whether or not, as the government says, that protections in the new treaty make Rwanda safe. Can we say today Rwanda is safe now, when, of course, the Supreme Court said, having looked at the evidence, it wasn't?
And what evidence do you need within this bill in order to say, yeah, OK, we think it is?
Well, the government itself has said what needs to be done. They've given us a detailed policy statement. They've said these are the things that we're going to do. The problem is they're in the future. They've not yet been done. They're quite complicated, some of them. They will take some time. And so we think, as a committee, we can't say, and Parliament can't say now, that Rwanda is safe. These things will have to be done. They've made a lot of progress. They've made a lot of effort. But we can't say yet that it is safe, so that has to be done. We've asked how long it will take to put these things in place. Government couldn't really tell us. It'll take a little time, take some time, but when it's done, it may well be that it'll turn out that Rwanda is safe.
So what happens in the meantime?
Well, in the meantime, government continues with its programme, I suppose. I mean, they can't... The Minister told us, the Home Secretary told us, he wouldn't, what he described as operationalise the treaty before all the implementing steps were in place. We're saying, well, OK, but these implementing steps should be in place before Parliament should be asked to say, yes, it's safe. And remember one thing, one of the things that the bill does is stop the courts looking at it, generally speaking, the little things around the edges. So the courts can't go back and look at what they looked at before and say, yes, that's fine. It's our job to do it, and we think that Parliament shouldn't be asked to do that until all the implementing measures are in place.
What does that mean for planes taking off?
Well, they won't take off now anyway. But if the Home Secretary, if the Home Office can put together the implementation, and there's quite a lot to do. They need new laws, they need new processes, new systems, new judges, new personnel, new training. All of that has to be done. Get on and do it. I mean, both this government and the Rwandan government seem to be working quite hard at it. Then, when they've done it, they can go ahead.
Every minister I've spoken to of late has said that the planes will take off by the spring. That's only the month after next.
Well, that's the government's plan, no doubt. I can't see it happening that quickly because there's quite a lot to do, as I've said, and we think this should come back to Parliament for Parliament to look at what they've done to see whether it really does work. But remember, the courts can't now look at this, really, effectively. Parliament has to answer the question. There was a detailed criticism of the systems, not the goodwill of the Rwandan government, but really the practicalities. You can't see if it works until you've seen how it's in operation.
The Prime Minister has implored the other place to sign this off so that it can become law, because it is the will of the people.
Well, I'm not sure why it's the will of the people, because this wasn't, I think, in the manifesto. But that's not really the point. The point is we have to do our job. The government has said we're not going to allow the courts to decide if this is safe or not. You, Parliament, must say it is safe. Here's a treaty. Here are the new protections. Those make it safe. And we're simply saying, well, they may do, but we can't say that yet because there's still quite a lot to do on your own evidence. So we need to have that done and see how it works.
So this is going to be caught up in another game of ping-pong between the two houses?
Well, the government can override us. I mean, if the House today decides that it agrees with the report of our committee, which is a cross-party committee, an unanimous report from everybody, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, crossbenchers, the government can override it. I hope they don't, because I think that's not really very respectful to the committee, but if they do, then they can go ahead.
But you don't think that's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know what the plan It's a long time since I've been in government knowing what the game plan is. I don't know, but I hope it doesn't, but they will have to override it and tell us why.
Do you think we will ever see people sent from this country to Rwanda?
Not for me to speculate on that. I'm on a limited thing, which is, has the government achieved what it said it was going to achieve to deal with all the problems that the Supreme Court had identified? We say simply, you may well do, you may well have done, but we can't tell that now because there's still so much to do on your own evidence.
My Lord, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking
Nice
the
to see
time.
you.
Thank you. Bear with me 1 second, if you would, please. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There will be a very short respite between Storm Isha leaving and the next low-pressure system arriving tomorrow, which could be another storm, we're told. If it is, it's going to be called Storm Jocelyn. The amber wind warnings have just expired, but it will still be a windy start to the day. Blustery showers will blow in from the west, with some being heavy and also thundery.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So just how bad is it out there at the moment? This is the scene in New Haven. We'll have more from Ashna in just a few moments' time. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. So, you've probably, excuse me, some of you at home, after drinking my tea and it's spluttering it all over the desk, may have stayed at home this morning because the weather is appalling. Actually, you look out the window and give me your forecast.
The window weather forecast, bright but still, in London at least.
Not bad. I think you could get a job.
I once came second in a job interview for weather forecaster, and yeah, so that's maybe why.
OK, who got the
Was I first?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I'm saying no names.
What's happening?
So, yeah, the weather is calming down because Storm Isha is moving away, but that's not the last of it. We've got this jet stream that's set up across the Atlantic. It's fired Storm Isha towards us, and now there's another area of low pressure coming. So that's the wet and windy weather for tomorrow. That's our delight.
Storm Jocelyn.
If it is, it'll be Jocelyn.
Storm Jocelyn. Goodness me, we'll have to wait and see. Any not for you getting in this morning, then?
Not too much, no. There was a few sort of bins blown down on the road on the way in, but nothing too severe, to be honest. I've also figured out what 105 was that Lucy Frazer was talking about earlier.
So 105 is the telephone number that the government minister...
Yeah, if you've got a power cut, if you're in England, Scotland and Wales, you call 105 and it automatically connects you to your local operator.
Oh, does it? Yeah. Makes no difference, but it connects you. Anyway.
I mean, if you've got no electricity, I guess
that
you've got mobile phones, haven't you?
Say that, and your mobile won't work because the tower's down, yeah.
But do think of our Friends and Neighbours in Ireland, 230,000 properties without power this morning. In Northern Ireland, at its peak, it was 53,000. So really, really significant.
Sure. Alice is at King's Cross for us this morning. Lots of problems with the trains as well, Alice. Is it getting in better?
Yeah, that's right. Train companies are desperately working to get services back to normal, but they have an enormous challenge ahead of them, particularly up in Scotland, because ScotRail, they suspended all services potentially up until after midday, and that is having a huge impact on our rail work across the country. The 9 o'clock service here up to Edinburgh was unfortunately cancelled, and we understand ScotRail are dealing with 17 different incidents of items falling into overhead electric cables, and that's having an enormous impact north of the border, but also down on the southeast coast. There are delays of trains from St Pancras to Dover of up to an hour and a half because the winds there was just so high last night.
OK, for now, thank you. Keep an eye on that throughout the day, of course, here on Sky News. So do stay tuned our way. Is the BBC biased? That was a question we were asking you this morning.
Yes, lots of response on social media, an awful lot. Embarrassing, amateur and populist response from
me.
No, not from you, from the Minister. Apparently reaching those conclusions with no evidence is quite unbelievable. I hope she's never called for jury service, not being able to differentiate the difference between belief and perception. And someone else saying that we keep telling the BBC people the BBC is biased, so there's now a perception the BBC is biased, so we better investigate that. That effectively there is a feedback loop going on, that if people keep pointing at it, go, it's biased, people believe it, and then they go and chase after themselves. And finally, please leave BBC alone. It's not perfect by any means, but it's still a broadcasting gem, a radio service particularly valued around the world with regards to the World Service. Don't get me wrong, comments in there, people do feel as though it's biased. They point to certain programmes, but there's also mention of another broadcaster that lots of Tory MPs go and broadcast on, that people say, well, if you're going to investigate one, maybe investigate the other as well.
Which one?
So I was talking to a former senior BBC employee last night, being very delicate about this. I was like,
really good on the Arsenal front row, mate, I'm telling you.
And what he was saying was that actually, for the song and dance made about BBC impartiality, you're in a media climate now where you have got channels that are mixing the political and the news more than we have in the past. You've got questions around sort of foreign ownership of newspapers that will probably be coming back this week in relation to the Telegraph. So there's a lot of big meaty stuff to get into for Ofcom and the Culture Secretary. And is BBC impartiality a bit of a sideshow, was what this person I was talking to was suggesting.
OK, let us know your thoughts. You can tweet us directly if you would like to, at Kay Burley, at Gareth Barlow, at
Rob Powell News.
There you go, Rob Powell News, in case you forgot. Rob Powell News at the end. Let us know your thoughts. We've just had this statement in from the Duchess of York after the news that she has been diagnosed with a malignant melanoma. She says, I've been taking some time to myself as I've been diagnosed with malignant melanoma, a form of skin cancer. My second cancer diagnosis within a year, after I was diagnosed with breast cancer this summer and underwent a mastectomy and reconstructive surgery. It was thanks to the great vigilance of my dermatologist that the melanoma was detected when it was. If it's any comfort to her at all, I was speaking to a cancer surgeon just the other day, and he was telling me that going forward, generally, we would each have 3 cancers in our lifetime, and we would survive all of them. Our thoughts very much with the Duchess of York. Very challenging time for her and the family. Now, it's a familiar sight for those living in cities across the country. E-bike rentals left strewn across the pavement, a nuisance for most and a potential hazard for those who are visually impaired. Joined by Sarah Gayton from the National Federation of the Blind. Hi, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. E-bikes, why are they a problem? E-scooters?
Absolute nightmare. They're being left all over the pavement. They're cluttering up and obstructing, where people walk and move. They're being left on pedestrian push-button crossings. They're being left on tactile paving. They're the little bobbles that blind people find the crossing. And, they've been sort of knocked over, fallen over, causing trip hazards. And they're just everywhere. It's like an explosion that's happened in London.
So what do you want to happen?
They need to be taken immediately off the streets and then only brought back when they can be docked and locked off the pavement.
OK, so we do see some of those docking stations, particularly with the Boris bikes, the Santander or whatever they're called now. You have to lock them back in to where you've got them from. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. That's just for the dockless bikes.
Yeah.
The e-scooters we just want to see gone, but the dockless bikes need docked and locked, just like Boris bikes. So everybody knows where to put them. They're not going to fall over. They're not going to be left tripping people over. They're not going to be blocking pavements, taxi ranks, bus stops, drop curbs, you name it. They're everywhere in London.
I'm guessing people who are visually impaired, Sarah, are thinking it's just an obstacle course, and some of them perhaps don't even want to go out of the house.
Absolutely. We've got a member called Yemi. He's actually taking more taxis now. And he's an older gentleman, you know, and he wants to get out and he wants to exercise. But, you know, they're just dotted around, left everywhere on the pavement.
So what would you say to those that have got these Lime bikes or whichever other... I mean, there are others as well, of course.
They just need to take them off the streets, get those docking stations in, get them locked, and then they can carry on. But at the moment, you know, London has just been taken over by them, and whole pavements have been sort of bikes just everywhere over them. But even 1 or 2K just left could be a trip hazard.
Yeah.
You know, if you break your hip, you could break a leg, you know, and not people's confidence to go out. You know, everybody needs to be mobile on those pavements. We need a safe space for people with white canes, with guide dogs. You know, you can just knock them and they fall over as well, Kay. I've seen that, you know, and they're dangerous. And
and in this weather as well, they're going to blow everywhere, aren't they?
Nightmare. I mean, absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Sarah. It's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Bear with me 1 second, if you would, please. Let us know your thoughts. You can tweet us directly if you would like to. Now, let me tell you about the Indian Prime Minister. He has formally opened a controversial Hindu temple, which was built on the ruins of a historical mosque. Let's find out more about it, should we? And Neville is standing by for us. So, Neville, why is this controversial, then?
Well, Kay, it's not only controversial, it's contentious. There have been decades of court cases. This is over a piece of land which Hindus believe, which is majority of the population, about 80%, is the birthplace of Ram. Now, on that spot was a mosque which was there for about 500 years. In 1992, thousands of right-wing workers descended on this temple town and destroyed that mosque, broke it brick by brick. This is because right-wing organizations, including Prime Minister Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party, had generated this sort of Hindu renaissance to try and rebuild and retake this land. And now we're seeing how the final product of it, this temple which is being built, has been hyped by the government, has been hyped by Prime Minister Modi for a sort of a political victory, if you must say that. It is going to help him garner support and votes for the upcoming general elections. But yes, controversial it is.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks very much. Wilfred's joining us now to look forward to what's going to happen later on today. We're talking about American politics earlier on, Wilf, but also Keir Starmer's making a big speech, isn't he? Another one.
Exactly. Keir Starmer expected to give a speech from about 10 a.m, so near the top of the show, and we'll be going to that live when it begins. He's addressing the civil society summit in London, and he's going to be talking about a society of service. We've heard him say that before, but also how he'll embrace charities and civic institutions that the Conservatives, he said, have been waging war on. The National Trust has been picked up as a likely target or area he wants to show support to in this speech. It'll be interesting to see if this really cuts through as a big area of difference between the two parties. So much of what we've been talking about, Kay, over the last couple of weeks is how there's sort of quite a lot of overlap and no clear policy difference. So we'll see if he makes a clear wedge here between the two main parties.
Yeah, and why has Ron the Sanctimonious become so great now?
Well, classic. You're pointing to the fact that Ron DeSantis pulled out yesterday. Of course, the next primary, only the second primary, New Hampshire, is tomorrow to decide the Republican nominee for president. And in doing so, very quickly pivoted from 18 months of criticising Donald Trump to endorsing him. And thus, very quickly, Donald Trump did the same and said how great he was. I mean, classic spinelessness at this period of the Republican race. I will say, to see DeSantis literally endorse the person he's been criticising the moment he pulled out. Not even a day's break, not even a week's break. does speak to the lack of principles that are going on in this race at the moment.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks, Wilf. Wilf, live from 10 o'clock here on Sky News. Still to come, we'll get an update from our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle on the situation in the area, including Israeli attacks on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. And a live update on Storm Isha, which has disrupted power and transport networks across the UK and Scotland.
That has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it, it got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms, I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh! Close and personal with her, aren't they?
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Let's get an update from the Middle East this morning, should we? Over the weekend, Lebanese state media and health officials reported at least one person has been killed and several others injured after an Israeli airstrike hit a car near an army checkpoint in South Lebanon. Let's get more on that and indeed widen out the topic with Alistair, who's joining us now. Hi, Alistair. We'll get on to that, but let's talk about Netanyahu to start with, should we? What is the view on the ground in Israel? Does he still have support?
Netanyahu as an individual is a prime minister who we've seen losing a lot of his support. It started at the beginning of last year because of judicial reforms. And then sort of when October the 7th happened, you did see a real coalescing of the country. It became very united in its goals to eliminate Hamas. But as the war has continued, people who are opposed to Netanyahu have again started to come out and question whether he is the right man for the job. He's always styled himself as Mr. Security, but many people blame him for what happened on October the 7th because he was the Prime Minister at the time. And you're also starting to see splits as well, significantly within the war cabinet. So apparently he's not really on speaking terms with Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, and don't forget there's 5 men in the war cabinet, and one of those is a guy called Gedi Eisenkot, a former IDF chief of staff, who's not in the same political party as Netanyahu, doesn't rarely ever speak. I've never known him give an interview, but he did give an interview to Israeli media that was broadcast a couple of days ago, and he was scathing of Netanyahu, saying that, you know, if you think that military pressure is the best way to get hostages out, that is wrong. He was critical that there's been no plan thought of for the day after. And so you are starting to see from various different corners people questioning whether Netanyahu is the right man to be Prime Minister.
Meantime, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, pushing ever further south. We're hearing about strikes in Khan Yunis and down by the Rafah crossing as well. But also on other fronts, the IDF is being asked to step up. I'm thinking about the situation in Lebanon and also strikes on the West Bank.
Yeah, we spent a bit of time up on the northern border, the Lebanese-Israeli border, last week, and it is very, very active up there in military terms. About 100,000 people have been evacuated from the villages along the border, the Israeli villages along the border, and that is troubling the Israeli government, how to get them back home again. And so what you see is the Israelis are really stepping up strikes against, particularly against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but also against Hamas factions that operate in southern Lebanon. In return, Hezbollah are firing towards Israel as well, although probably not with as much frequency. And so now we're in a position where people are starting to talk of when there will be a war with Hezbollah, not if there'll be a war. Now, what Israel wants is for Hezbollah to withdraw its forces beyond the Litani River, and that is in conjunction with a UN Security Council resolution that dates back many, many years. But actually, a lot of people that we've spoken to, Israelis up in the north, say that even if there was a ceasefire, because Hezbollah say if the war in Gaza comes to an end, they will stop fighting. But Israelis are now saying, you know, even that won't be enough, because we saw what happened with Hamas on October the 7th and them coming over the border. We worry Hezbollah will do the same. So that is a really concerning situation that is concerning a lot of the Western world. There's a lot of diplomacy at the moment trying to avoid an all-out war.
Yeah, and as far as a two-state solution is concerned, we're being told by the British government, not least by the Prime Minister himself, also by the Defence Secretary, that a two-state solution is the only way forward. We're hearing also from the Americans, they're saying the same thing. Netanyahu saying something different.
Western diplomats have always clung to this idea of a two-state solution, and frankly, until October the 7th, it seemed completely unrealistic and a non-starter. But since October the 7th, and as the war's progressed, in the West, particularly in Washington, there's a real feeling that this is an opportunity to revisit the possibility of a two-state solution. And that is what they're pushing out very hard. You've seen a lot of Arab states as well, either publicly or sort of imply that they won't get involved in the rebuilding of Gaza and the security of Gaza until they can be assured that there is some sort of pathway to peace for the Palestinian people. But Benjamin Netanyahu has always been opposed to a two-state solution. He spoke to President Biden a couple of days ago, the first time the two had spoken for a long time. Things are not great between them. Biden came out and said that he thinks there are ways that there could be a two-state solution, even with Netanyahu in power. But within hours, Netanyahu released a statement and said, nope, not on my watch, that's not going to happen. And so again, you've got this friction between Netanyahu and some of his key allies.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks very much. Now, this time last week, he was the new kid on the block, already usurped by Yalda Hakim, who's here to tell us about her new show. Very excited about it. It starts tonight.
It does, Kay, 9 p.m. this evening, from 9 to 10. And it's a show focused on foreign affairs. I mean, as you know, as our viewers know, we've revamped our entire lineup. So we have politics at 7, 8 o'clock we have UK news. And now my show will be launched at 9 p.m, looking at the big global stories and trying to make sense of it for our viewers.
Can you tell us what you've got tonight?
So tonight we're obviously looking at what's happening in New Hampshire with the primaries. And of course, you saw last night Ron DeSantis out of the race. It's now down to Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. There doesn't seem to be any stopping Donald Trump at this stage. It looks inevitable that he is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party for the race to the White House. So we'll be discussing that. We'll have a panel each night as well this week, looking at the big international stories. And like I said, I mean, we live in an incredibly polarised society at the moment. And so I want us to have thoughtful conversations to try and better understand our world.
Interestingly, I was chatting to somebody from the American Embassy just across the river here last week, and they were saying it's not a shoo-in that he will get the nomination. Don't write off Nikki Haley, is what they were saying.
Well, now it's a one-on-one race. It does mean if you were anti-Trump, you've got someone to coalesce around, and that's been the challenge for the party, hasn't it? Is every time there's been a primary, there's been a field of 12 candidates. They divide that vote if you're not a fan of him, and there potentially is the chance. Potentially.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, although the path looks incredibly treacherous for Nikki Haley at the moment, if the polls are to be believed, and so far the polls have been correct, Donald Trump did incredibly well in Iowa. And so, yes, while those who are anti-Trump don't want to see him back in the White House, will probably rally around Nikki Haley. And in New Hampshire, don't forget, a lot of, independents can also vote who aren't part of the party as well.
It's primary, isn't it?
That's correct, because it was the caucus in Iowa. So we'll have to see.
It's fascinating how it might link up with when the UK general election is as well, because obviously we don't have a date for that, but that could come, I think, 9 days after the US election is the rumoured date. And imagine if you have Trump coming in then, if that is how it plays out, and then Sir Keir Starmer may be coming in 9 days later. It could be a sort of difficult first conversation, I guess.
And a very busy period for us, covering that. We've got David Lammy, the shadow Foreign Secretary,
he had a bugger of it. Oh, can I say that? I've just said it. At the weekend, didn't he?
He did. And we will be asking him about all of that. If the polls are to be believed, he is going to be the Foreign Secretary. So he's had a lot of things to say about Trump as well, so we'll be getting to that.
Show from 9 o'clock tonight? 9 o'clock tonight. Launches tonight, no longer, the new boy. Really looking forward to it. Set looks magnificent. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, guys. That's it from us for this morning. This is what Storm Isha is looking like. We could be saying goodbye to her. And hello to Storm Jocelyn by tomorrow.